There we go. There we go. I figure it out now. It took me a hot minute, but I figured it the fuck out. Took me a hot minute, but I figured it the fuck out. Alright, hello everybody. Hi, my name is Fio, or the Don, or just Fio Don. I hope you guys are having a fantastic Tuesday. I am coming over from Twitch because fuck all. I had a really shitty experience today, and kind of feel like being on the fucking Team Red instead of Team Purple and stuff like that. So, I always fucking watch these kind of types of videos on YouTube all the time. Was gonna pull it up, but I still want to live stream and stuff like that because I just love live streaming. Don't really do it much here on YouTube because still trying to figure out what is what. You know what I mean? But yeah, we'll just go ahead and give this a try for maybe a couple days or just throw on a random one. Um, and that. Uh, there we go. I don't want top chat. I just want the live chat. Now, I wonder if this. Yeah, that's only Twitch. Show settings. I wonder if I can get the old Twitch overlay I used into my YouTube one. That's just. I wonder if I could just get a YouTube overlay real quick off the net. I'm pretty sure I could pull something off the net just real quick. I didn't want to actually activate the turn off. I think I just found some just real quick. Nice. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's close that and let's do a test. Okay, I see ghost chat, but okay, I see all that, but where is the where does the chat show? I don't see my own message, stuff like that. Hmm. Oh, what the fuck? Okay. Does it not? Oh, yeah, there it is. Ah, there it is. Okay, it just took it a minute. There we go. I figured it out finally. Look. That's fuck all, isn't it? There we go. Ah, wow. Perfect. Alright. So, again, hello, YouTube. My name is Fee, or the Don, or just Feodon. I'm here today to do... Oh, yay, this mod actually uploaded. Stuff like the Arabian. Never played this one. Thought about doing it, maybe. But I'm coming over from YouTube today, or... Yeah, I'm coming over to YouTube today because... Fuck all, I just felt like streaming over on YouTube today. After just a shit day at Twitch. I'm just gonna randomly select a campaign and just gonna go from there. And until I lose the campaign, or just keep playing the campaign and stuff like that, we'll see how long we stream for. Because that's just kind of how I do things. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by his tail. If you always let him go, my mommy said you picked the very best, and you are it. So this mod got installed. These other factions. I never played any of these.
Pure as starlight.
So nice fit. So this is an archer army.
Master of the Wild Hunt.
And he's all cavalry. Okay. And I know I could break this guy. He starts. Here's Ulfway. Oh, he's right near the Skaven.
Wild as flame.
Ooh, this would be interesting. Yeah, this is the tree grove for all of them, pretty much.
The forest calls!
Yeah. Okay. You know what? The green skins. With the bad teeth.
You listen, or you get your head torn off. Understand? The crowd's whispering. Ready for murdering.
Oh, this is iron. Oh, that's Grimcore.
Azag is here.
Supreme ruler of 8 peaks.
Let's take what?
The biggest, meanest gob out.
Dying Claw try. This better involve fuck. Brutality. I'm the one true git. Ha!
Black Horse, Big Boss. Oh, Black Horse, Black Ops. Okay, so he's the big wah.
Only I keep.
We can achieve much.
I am the Lich.
He's a cat, man.
Blood!
The fuck are you supposed to do? Wait, you only start with a Lord and a Trebuchet. Archers and the Trebuchet and the Lord aren't. Like, how are you so... Use what? Wow. That's very Lord.
Indulgence!
No one.
Ours starts with the Red Ogre.
I am the Eternal.
One 1% for any faction leader killed. Does he have to kill them? I'm pretty sure he has to kill them. Marauder chieftains may devote themselves to corn. The high seas, reef, and storm nutrition. Ooh. So he's like a Viking. Yeah, they made a Viking corn. And this has got a shit of them. That's...
Bring me to my men.
Sigmar's will.
Death would be such...
Grand Theogenist.
One... The Empire needs the Dark Lady of Nuln.
Okay. I think we're gonna do Bond Black. And yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. Awa.
Chafed at being made to wait outside the golden doors of the Primarch's chambers. He would have expected better manners from a Primarch than to make a high-ranking emissary of the Administratum of Terror wait for so long. He had boarded the Pride of the Emperor 3 days ago, and
Sorry
such
about that.
delays were the kind of thing he inflicted on others to demonstrate his superior rank. Finally, his petition for an
To
audience had been
die
approved.
is
and
to
his
find
meetings had
eternal
before
sanctuary,
Fulgrim's servants arrived to apply perfume
safety from the horrors of this land.
The scent of the oils was pleasing enough, though somewhat powerful for his ascetic tendencies. Sweat glistened on his bald
The
pate,
enemies
and
of
mingled
Wissenland
oils
shall
produced
embrace
stinging
their
droplets that irritated
mortality.
his eyes and caught in the back of his throat. A pair of elaborately armored warriors stood to attention at the golden doors to Fulgrim
Oh, wow.
staterooms, beyond which Braxton could hear the deafening din of what he supposed was music, but sounded like an unmitigated racket to his ears. A pair of marble sculptures of wild curves and angles stood to either side of the guards, though what they were supposed to represent eluded Braxton's understanding. He adjusted his administrative robes
Let's see.
around his shoulders,
First one,
while letting his attention
first one,
drift to the paintings that filled this great
And that
terrazzo-floored hallway.
Well,
The golden frames were elaborate to the point of ridiculousness, and the garish colours that filled them quite defied any aesthetic appreciation, though he admitted...
What are we
understanding
if we do
art
not
was limited.
advance?
Ormond
Engineer.
Braxton had represented the
A
Terran
trifling
forces
error.
in the negotiations that had seen much of the solar system brought into compliance. He had been part of the delegation trained at the School of Iterators, and
Elspeth
Vander Tobias
von
and
Draken.
Kirill Sinderman were his close acquaintances. His exceptional skills as a negotiator and civil servant in the Terran Administrative Corps
For
had
Verena
ensured
and
his selection
Nuln.
for this mission, as it called for delicate diplomacy and tact. Only one of such stature could petition for a Primarch, especially for such a task as was to be appointed him. At last, the doors to Fulgrim's staterooms were flung open, and booming peals of music spilled into the hall before the Primarch's chambers. The guards snapped to attention, and Braxton drew himself up to his full height as he prepared to enter into the presence of the Primarch of the Emperor's children. He awaited some signal that he was to go in, but nothing was forthcoming, and so he hesitantly stepped forward. The guards made no motion to stop him, so he carried on, his unease increasing as the doors swung closed behind him without apparent aid. The music was deafening. Dozens of phonocasters were scattered around, blaring a multitude of what appeared to be different kinds of music. Paintings of all manner of vileness hung from the walls, some depicting acts of violent barbarity, and others of unspeakably vile conduct that was beyond pornography. Braxton felt his trepidation grow as he heard arguing voices from the central stateroom beyond. "My lord Fulgrim," he inquired, "are you there? It is Administrator Ormond Braxton. I have come to see you from the Council of Terror." Instantly the voices ceased, and the phonocasters fell silent. Braxton glanced around him to see if he was alone, reckoning that the staterooms surrounding the central chamber were empty of life as far as he could see. "You may enter," called a powerful musical voice from ahead. Braxton gingerly made his way towards the sound, fully expecting to see the Primarch and one of his loyal captains, though the argumentative tone
The
of
Dark
the voices
Lady of
still
Nome.
puzzled him. He stepped into the Primarch's central stateroom and pulled up short at the sight confronting him.
Standing by!
Fulgrim, for the mighty physique could belong to none other, swept around his chambers, naked but for a purple loincloth, and brandishing a gleaming silver sword. His flesh was like hard marble, pale and veined with dark lines, and his face had a manic look to it, like that of a man in the grip of a chemical stimulant. The stateroom itself was a mess, with pieces of broken marble strewn around, and the walls chipped and stained with paint. A giant canvas stood at the far end of the chamber, though its angle prevented Braxton from seeing what manner of image was painted upon it.
We literally
The odour of uneaten food hung heavy in the air, and not even the perfumed oils could mask the stench of rotten meat. "Emissary Braxton," cried Fulgrim, "how good of you to come." Braxton covered his surprise at the state of the Primarch and his stateroom, and inclined his head. "It is my honour to attend upon you, my
Battle protocols!
"Nonsense!" exclaimed Fulgrim.
Missile
"I have been
infantry!
unforgivably rude in keeping you waiting, but I have been locked in council with my most trusted advisors in the week since our departure from the Purdus region." The Primarch
Hellblaster!
towered over Braxton, and he felt the sheer physical intimidation of such a magnificent being threatened to overwhelm him. But he dug deep into his reserves of calm and found his voice once more. "I come with
Before me I
tidings from
see a
Terra,
host of
and would
souls
deliver
for the
them to you, my
taking.
lord."
But first, we
Of
must
course,
break their
said Fulgrim.
bodies and
But
set
first,
their
my dear
spirits
Braxton,
free.
Would you do me an enormous favour? "I would be honoured to serve, my lord," said Braxton, noticing that Fulgrim's hands were discoloured as though from a fire. What heat could wound such a Primarch, he wondered. "What manner of favour would you have me do?" Fulgrim spun his sword
yeah.
and put his hand on
Oh,
Braxton's
shit.
shoulder,
No.
guiding him towards the vast canvas set up at the end of the stateroom. Fulgrim's pace practically forced Braxton to run, even though his generously fleshed form was unsuited to such a speed. He mopped his brow with a scented handkerchief as Fulgrim proudly stood in before the canvas and said, "What do you think of this, then? The likeness is quite uncanny, isn't it?" Braxton stared in open-mouthed horror at the image slathered on the canvas, a truly repellent portrait of an armoured warrior, thickly painted with all manner of garish colours, crude brushstrokes, and loathsome stench.
Yeah, there it goes.
The vastness of the image only served to heighten the horror
Send
of
us
what
out!
it portrayed, for the subject was none other than the Primarch of the Emperor's children, so loathsomely delineated as to be insulting and degrading to one so awe-inspiring. Though he was no student of art, even Braxton recognized this as a moral atrocity, an affront to the being.
Yeah, those red bulls are...
He glanced over to see if this was some
This was a
elaborate
bad
gift,
spot for
but
this machine
the
gun
Primarch's
team.
face was rapt and unswerving in his adoration of the vile creature. "You're lost for words, I can see," said Fulgrim. "I'm not surprised. It is, after all, by Serena D'Angelis, and only recently finished. You are honored
Yeah,
to
these
see it
rifle
before its
teams
public
are
unveiling
just
at the
hearing
first
all of
performance of
this stuff.
Mistress Kinska's
And the
Malefeasance
arty that we have
in the
coming
newly
from over
refurbished
here
Labyrinth.
is wiping us with these zombies very well.
And I... Braxton not too afraid of what he might say. The horror was too much. The colours nauseating in a way that went beyond simple crudity. The stench of the surface was making his gorge rise. He moved away from the kitchen, pressing his handkerchief to his mouth and nose as Fulgrim trailed behind him, idly swinging his sword. Raising symptoms. My lord, if I may, said Braxton. What? Oh, yes, of course, said Fulgrim, as though listening
Oh,
to
we
his
tell the arty to stop.
We said something about news and terror. Recovering himself, Braxton said, yes, from the mouth of the sigil. So, what does old Malcador have to say for himself? Asked Fulgrim.
219
shocked at the
just for one
informality
arty
and lack of
team, which
respect
is
inherent
what?
in the Primarch's
The
tone.
7.7
Firstly,
counts.
I bring word of Lord
Got
Magnus
it.
of Prospero. It has come to the attention of the Emperor, beloved by all, that contrary to the dictates of the Council of Nicaea, Lord Magnus has continued his researches into the mysteries of the Immaterium. Fulgrim nodded to himself as he began pacing once more and said, I knew he would, but the others were too blind to see it. Even with the new chaplains in place, I suspected Magnus would backslide. He does love his mysteries. Quite, agreed Braxton. The Sigillite has dispatched the wolves of Fenris to bring Magnus back to Terra to await the Emperor's judgment upon him. Fulgrim paused, turning to face the vile painting once more, and shook his head as though disagreeing with some unseen interrogator. Then Magnus is to be... what? Charged with a crime? Asked Fulgrim heatedly, as though his anger at the messenger would somehow change the facts. I do not know any more, my lord, replied Braxton. Simply that he is to return to Terra.
Well, devil is
Strip
just
the
a
bats
stupid
from
experiment.
Space wolves. Fulgrim nodded, though he was clearly unhappy at such a development.
And the next thing I'm
You
gonna
said,
do
firstly, what other news do you bring? Braxton knew that he would have to choose his words carefully.
Elspeth
for there was
von
more that was
Draken,
yet displayed.
Dark Lady of Nome.
I bring
Engineer.
news concerning the conduct
Von
within one of your
Draken.
brother Primarch's legions. Fulgrim ceased his pacing and looked up in sudden interest. It is Horus's legion. Braxton covered his irritation and nodded. It is. Have you already heard my news? Fulgrim shook his head. No, I was just guessing. Go on and tell me your news, but be aware that Horus is my sworn brother, and I will brook no disrespect of him. Of course not, confirmed Braxton. At present, the 63rd
This
expedition
belongs
makes
in
war
my
against a
archives.
civilization calling itself the Oretian
Amethyst Mage.
Horus came in the name of peace, but the misguided, the War Master, put in Fulgrim, and Braxton cursed himself for making such an elementary error. The starting
yeah.
testing point was showing lack of respect for their position. Apologies, continued Braxton smoothly. The rulers of these planets attempted to assassinate the War Master, and thus he declared a legal war upon them to bring their worlds to compliance. In this matter, he has been aided by Lord Angron of the 7th Legion. Fulgrim laughed. Then I don't hold up much hope for there being much left of this technocracy at the end of the war. Quite, said Braxton. Lord Angron's excesses, shall we say, are not unknown to the Council of Terra, but we have received some unsettling reports from Lord Commander Hector Varus, commander of the army units within the 63rd Expedition. Reports of what? Demanded Fulgrim. Braxton was unnerved to see that the Primarch's previous manic distraction appeared to have quite vanished. Reports of a massacre perpetrated by Astartes against Imperial civilians, my lord. Nonsense.
Elspeth von
Angron may be
Draken.
many things, but massacring Imperial citizens seems a little out of character even for him. Wouldn't you say? Reports have reached Terra regarding Lord Angron's conduct in the war. It's true,
Spiritor of
said Braxton,
Shaiish.
keeping his tone as neutral as possible. Though it is not of him that I speak. Horus? Asked Fulgrim, his voice hoarse, and Braxton saw what in a mortal he would have regarded as fear in his dark eyes. What has happened?
By forge and firearm!
Braxton paused before continuing. He
Engineer!
noted that there was no denial, as there had been when Fulgrim had thought Angron accused.
Master craftsman!
It appears that the War Master was grievously wounded on the planet of Davin, and some of his warriors were somewhat overzealous
By
when
Ulrich's
bringing him
wrath!
back on board the Vengeful Spirit. Overzealous? Barked Fulgrim. Speak plainly, man.
Emperor's
What does that
might!
mean? A sizable crowd had gathered on the embarkation decks of the War Master's flagship, and when the Astartes came back on board,
Taking
they
aim!
smote the crowd in their haste to reach the Medicae decks. Some 21 people are dead, and many more grievously injured. And you blame Horus for this? It is not my place to assign blame, my lord, said Braxton. I am merely informing you of the facts. Fulgrim rounded on him suddenly. Braxton felt his bladder loosen and a warmth trickle down his leg as the wild-eyed
Weapons
Primarch of the
at the
Emperor's
ready!
children towered over him, with his sword suddenly raised above his head as if to strike him down. Facts? Snarled Fulgrim. What does a foppish scribe such as you know of the facts of war? War is hard, fast, and cruel. Horus knows this, and he fights accordingly. If people are stupid enough to get in the way of that, then their own foolishness is to blame. Ormond Braxton had seen much in the way of egotism in his time within the civil administration of Terra, but he had never been faced with such barefaced arrogance and callous dismissal of human life. My lord, gasped Braxton, people
General!
are dead, killed by the Astartes. Such things will not just go away. Those responsible must be called to account, or the ideals of the Great Crusade will stand for nothing. Fulgrim lowered his sword,
I hope you've checked your
appearing
weapons,
only now
lads.
to notice its presence. He shook his head and
Hand
smiled,
gunners!
his ephemeral anger vanishing in the space of a moment. You are right, of course, my dear Braxton.
The
I
graveyard
apologize
rose.
for my uncivil
Engineer!
behavior and beg of your pardon. I am much vexed by the pain of wounds suffered battling an alien monstrosity in our previous campaign, and my temper is a fragile thing as a result.
Help!
No,
Blast
pardon.
the volley gun!
It is necessary, my lord, said Braxton slowly.
Ready to serve!
I understand your brotherhood with the War Master, and it is for that very reason that I am dispatched to you. The Council of Terra wishes you to travel to
Our
Aureus
weapons are
and
yours!
meet with the War Master to ensure that the principles that underpin the Great Crusade are being adhered to.
Weapons at the
Fulgrim
ready!
snorted in derision and turned away. So, now we must
Hand
fight
gunners!
with an eye forever over our shoulder. Are we not trusted to make war? You civilians want your conquests, but you do not care for how they are won, do you? War is brutality.
The enemy
and the more
feels
brutal it is, the
themselves
sooner it is over.
indestructible.
But that's not good enough for
No
you, is
will
it?
disabuse
In
them
your
of
We're all
this
eyes,
just
falsehood.
wars
fired.
must be
No
fought
one
according to
shot
an
back.
imperfect set of rules, imposed by those who have never seen a shot fired in anger, or risked their own blood alongside their brothers. Know this, Braxton. Every petty
you
restricted
did?
rule you civilians impose on our method of war means that more of my warriors die. Braxton was shocked by Fulgrim's bitterness, but hid his surprise. What response should I take back to the Council of Terra, my lord? Again,
Now
Fulgrim's
comes-
anger seemed to melt away in
think
the
we-
face of reason, and the mighty
Yeah, they've
Primarch
already
laughed.
literally just
Tell
one
them,
entire unit
Master
already.
Braxton, that I shall lead my warriors to the 63rd expedition, that I will examine how my brother does war, and that I shall be sure to tell you all about it. The sarcasm was heavy in Fulgrim's tone, but Braxton replied. Then, my lord, if I may take my leave, Fulgrim waved his hand dismissively and nodded. Yes,
Sir!
go. Return to your courtiers and scriveners, and tell them that the Lord Fulgrim will do their bidding. Braxton bowed once more and backed away from the barely dressed Primarch. When he had retreated a sufficient distance, he turned and made his way through the golden doors that led to normality. Behind him, he could hear voices arguing, and he risked a glance over his shoulder in an attempt to identify
Since
which
they could already shoot over these guys.
he felt a shiver travel the length of his spine
There we go.
as he saw that Fulgrim,
Cool.
Our orders!
he was speaking,
That's
loathsome pain.
Seeking enemy!
What are you doing? Asked a voice behind her, and she froze. Serena clutched the knife to her
Engineer!
breast as her mind raced to identify him.
Finding
In her
the
fevered
angle!
thoughts, she imagined that it was Oscar, come once again to save her. But when the question was asked again, she blinked and dropped the knife as she recognized that the speaker was the Astartes warrior, Lucius. Her breathing was heavy, and her blood was pounding as she looked down at the corpse lying next to the unfinished picture of the swordsman. She couldn't recall the dead man's name. An irony she found amusing, given her official title as Remembered. But he had been a talented composer. Now he was raw material. His blood pumping enthusiastically onto the floor. When the tongue smelled his blood filled her nostrils, she felt her hand grasp her shoulder and turn her around. She looked up into Lucy's
One still
boyish
pushing it
face.
down.
She reached out flatly to touch his face, and his eyes followed
Not
her
easy.
fingers as they traced the line of his jaw. What happened here? Asked Lucius, nodding towards the corpse. That man is dead. Yes, said Serena, slumping to the floor. I killed him. Why? Asked Lucius. Even in her fugue state, Serena detected an interest beyond that which would normally be aroused by such a discovery. What remained of the rational part of her mind understood the precariousness of the situation, and she covered her face with her hands and began to weep uncontrollably, hoping the onset of tears would trigger the male comfort reaction. Lucius let
We
her,
did lose one
and she
fucking
cried,
person. God damn it.
He tried to rape me. Rape you? Asked Lucius aghast. What? He tried to force himself upon me and I killed him. I fought him, but he was too strong. He hit me, and I reached out to grab
Raise
the
our
first thing I could find
standards
to
here.
use as a weapon. I suppose I must have picked up my knife and you killed him, finished Lucius. Serena looked up through her tears, hearing no condemnation of Lucius's death.
Elspeth von Draken.
Yes, I killed him. Then the bastard got what he deserved.
Amethyst
said Lucius, pulling
Guardian.
Serena to her feet. He tried to violate you, and you defended
Weaving
yourself.
weapon
Yes.
and magic
Serena
is the
nodded.
surest
The
path to
exhilaration of
victory.
lying to this warrior who could snap her neck with his fingers, sending warm rushes of pleasure through her entire body. I met him in La Fenice, and he said he wanted to see some of my work, she gasped, already knowing that Lucius would not arrest her, or otherwise call her to account for the killing. It was foolish, I know, but he seemed genuinely interested. When we returned to my studio...
The
He
graveyard
turned on you.
rose.
Yes, nodded Serena. And now he's dead. Oh, Lucius,
Engineer.
what am I going to do? Don't worry, said Lucius. This won't need to go any further. I'll have some servitors dispose of his remains, and this can all be forgotten about. Serena threw herself against Lucius in gratitude and let her tears come once more, feeling nothing but contempt for this man and his belief that such a traumatic event, had it been real, could be forgotten about so easily. She pushed herself from his breastplate and bent to pick up her knife. The blade was still wet with blood, and the cold steel glittered invitingly in the light. Without conscious thought, she reached up and sliced the blade across her cheek, drawing a thin line of blood from her pallid skin. Lucius watched her impassively and asked,
Yeah, I'll just.
"What did you do that for?"
Such boundless
"So that I
skill.
don't forget
I am
what happened,"
impressed.
she said, handing him the knife and rolling up the sleeves to show the many scars and fresh cuts in the flesh of her arms. "Pain is my way of remembering all that has gone before. If I hold on to that pain, then I will never allow it to be forgotten."
Yep, that should get
Lucius
through.
nodded and reached up to slowly run his fingertips over the crooked line of his nose. Serena could see the anger and hurt and pride within him, marked with his perfect features. A strange sensation of power filled her, as though her words carried more than meaning in their sounds, an influence beyond understanding. She felt this power flow through her and into the very air, filling the space between them with unknown potential. "What happened to your face?" asked Serena, unwilling to lose this remarkable sensation. "A barbaric son of a bitch named Loken broke it when he cheated in a fair fight." "He wounded, didn't he?" she asked, the sound of her words flowing like honey in his ears. "More than just physically, I mean." "Yes," said Lucius, his voice hovering. "He destroyed
Elite
my
troops
perfection.
and potent weaponry,
You'd
honed
want
and
to
enchanted in the gunnery.
Wouldn't you?"
Certifying
Dead
buildings
soon,
that is
said
structured.
Lucius. Serena smiled, reaching out and placing her hands on his. "Yes, I know you will." He gripped the knife tightly, and she lifted his unresisting hand to his face. "Yes," she said with a nod, "your perfect face is already gone forever. Do it." He returned her nod, and with a quick flick of his wrist, cut deeply into the flawless skin of his cheek. He flinched at the pain, but lifted the dripping knife to cut an identical line across the opposite cheek. "Now, you will never forget this, Loken," she said. Fulgrim paced the confines of his
Those
space,
Drathjar
watching
must
the
envy
ruins
our
and pondered
invention.
The words of emissary Braxton.
We are the
He had tried to
strength of the
conceal his
Empire.
unease at losing
For
the
Noun's
report, but he
ends.
suspected that the man had seen through his
Rejection,
facade
as
of
I
indifference.
foresaw.
He swung the silver sword with a glittering arc, its blade cutting the air with a sound like dripping cloth. Try as he might to forget them, the words of the Eldar Farseer kept returning, and though he had tried to purge the aliens' lies from his head, they would not leave him alone. Braxton's news of the Council of Terror's desire for him to investigate Horus and Angron's conduct only heightened his fear that the Farseer had spoken the truth. "It cannot be true," shouted Fulgrim. "Horus would never betray the Emperor." "Are you so sure?" asked the voice, and Fulgrim felt the familiar jolt of unease as it spoke. He could no longer delude himself that this was simply the voice of his own conscience, but was something else entirely. Since the portrait had been delivered to his stateroom, the honest counsellor in his head had, by some unknown means, relocated himself within the thick paints of the canvas, reshaping the image to suit its vocabulary. Fulgrim marvelled at his ability to simply accept this development, and each time the hideousness of the notion surfaced in his mind, it was quashed by a feeling of elation and attraction that melted his concerns like snow before the spring sun. He turned slowly towards the magnificent
Send us
picture
out!
Serena D'Angelis had painted for him, its splendor matched only by his amazement at what it had become in the days since it had been delivered to his staterooms. Fulgrim made his way through the ruin of his quarters and stared into the image of his own face on the canvas. The giant
Sigma
purple
commands!
armor stared at him from the picture, its features refined and regal, the mirror of his own. The eyes sparkled as though recalling some long-forgotten joke.
We
The
are
lips
Sigma's
curled in the
heirs!
curved wrinkle of the hypocrite, and the brow furrowed as though plotting some scheme of great cunning. Even as he stared into his own features,
Our weapons are
the
yours!
mouth twisted and pulled at the canvas as it formed new words. What if the alien spoke true? If Horus has indeed forsaken the Emperor,
Handgunners!
where would you stand in such a contest? Fulgrim felt clammy
Empire
sweat coat
endures!
his naked flesh, repulsed by the creeping horror of the picture, yet unaccountably drawn
Handgunners!
once again to
The
hear its
Empire
words, as though
endures!
they possessed some silken, siren-like attraction to him. As much as he wanted to slice his blade through the painting, he could not bear to see it destroyed. He is the most worthy of you,
Engineer!
its mouth contorting under the effort of speech. If Horus were to turn his face from the Emperor, where would you stand?
Handgunners!
The question is immaterial, snapped Fulgrim. The situation would never arise. Think you so? Laughed the painting. Even now, Horus
Standing
plants
by!
the seeds of his rebellion. Fulgrim clenched his jaw and
Take
aimed his sword at the image of himself on the
Handgunners!
canvas. I will not believe you, he shouted. You
The
cannot
Empire
know
is
these
yours!
things. But I do. How? Begged Fulgrim. You are not me. You cannot be me.
Handgunners!
No, agreed his twin. I am not. Call me the spirit of
By Ulrich's
perfection
wrath!
that will guide you in the coming
Weapons
days.
at the ready!
Handgunners!
Horus seeks war with the Emperor? Asked Fulgrim, almost unable to speak the words. Such was the horror of what they represented. He does not seek it, but it is forced
We are
upon him.
Sigmar's
The
heirs!
Emperor plans to abandon you all.
At your
Fulgrim.
service!
His perfection is naught but a sham.
Handgunners!
He has used you all to conquer the galaxy for him, and now seeks to ascend to godhood on the blood you have shed. No!
Cavalry
cried
ready!
Fulgrim, I won't believe this. The Emperor is human intelligence raised above all error
What
and
do you
imperfection
bid?
and extended to all possible truth. Your belief is irrelevant. It is already happening. Grand things are necessarily obscure to weak men. That which can be made
General!
explicit to the idiot is not worth my care. If Horus can see this, how is it that you, most perfect of primarchs, cannot?
Alright, let's see how
Because
this
you are lying!
Before me I see a
Smashing
host
his
of
fist into one
souls
the
for the
green marble
taking.
pillars that supported
But
the dome roof
first,
of his
we must
stateroom.
break their
Powdered
bodies and
stones
set
broke
their
from the collar,
spirits
and it
free.
collapsed in a cracked pile of splintered
On
rock.
our way!
You waste time in denial. You are already on the road to join your brother. I will support Horus in all things.
The Empire
gasped
endures!
but turn against the Emperor. That is too far. You will never know what is too far until you go beyond it. I know you, Fulgrim, and have tasted the forbidden desires you hold chained within the deepest, darkest recesses of your soul. Better to murder an infant in its cradle
Cavalry,
than nurse
ready!
an unacted upon desire. No, said Fulgrim,
Sigmar!
raising his bloody hand to his temple. I won't listen to you. Expose yourself to your deepest fear, Fulgrim. After that, fear has no power, and the fear of freedom shrinks and vanishes. You will be free. Free? Betrayal is not freedom, it is damnation. Damnation? No, it is liberty and unfettered freedom to explore all that can be. And learned the truth. For if he were perfect, then such things could not happen. So, only change is constant. The signal for rebirth, the egg of the
Sigmar
from
guides
which
us!
you arise. Ask us Fulgrim stared into the eyes of the eyes of the with a clarity born of perfect understanding, Fulgrim knew the answer to the question his reflection posed him. My fear is to fail.
Don't give them an inch!
The cold lights of the apothecarian were bright and hostile, staring down at Marius as he lay naked on the surgical slab. His limbs were immobile, held static by gleaming steel restraints and chemical inhibitors. The feeling of vulnerability was acute, but he had vowed to obey his Primarch's orders no matter what they were, and Lord Eidolon had assured him that this was what Lord Fulgrim desired. "Are you ready?" asked Fabius, the silver steel arms of the apothecary's chirurgeon machine looming over him like a great spider. Marius tried to nod, but his muscles would not obey him. I am, he said, fighting to say even that. Excellent, said Fabius. His narrow dark eyes bored into the face and examined his flesh, as a butcher might examine a choice cut of meat, or a sculptor a fresh block of virgin stone. Lord Commander,
Let us take it! There may be truths to uncover.
better than before. And so I shall, Captain Vibbing, grinned Fabius. You will not believe the things I can do. Chapter 17. The ships of the 63rd Expedition floated like a school of silver fish above the twin worlds of the Oretian technocracy. Sharing a common moon, the space above them was alive with electronic chatter as the War Master's forces prosecuted the war below. Wrecked communication satellites were debris in the upper atmosphere, and what remained of the Oretian monitors had long since plummeted as fiery meteors to the planet's surface. Fulgrim watched the slow drift of the War Master's ships above the second planet, their attention fixed on the conflict raging below rather than their rear defenses. He smiled as he realized that if he was clever, he could catch his brother unawares. Slow to 1/4 flank speed, ordered Fulgrim. All active systems to passive. The bridge of the Pride of the Emperor throbbed with activity as its crew hurried to obey his orders. He kept his eyes glued to the readouts and hololithic projections of the surveyor station and issued fresh orders in response to each sensor sweep. Captain Eisel watched his every move with admiration. Fulgrim could just imagine the bitter envy that must fill any man who knew that he would never approach such genius. The 8-week journey to the Oretian system had been one of enormous tedium for Fulgrim, with every diversion delighting him for only the briefest moment before becoming stale. He had even hoped for some catastrophe to occur in their warp translation, just for something to occupy his thoughts with some new sensation. But no such disaster had occurred. In preparation for his meeting with his beloved brother, Fulgrim's armor had been polished to a mirror sheen, the great golden eagle's wings sweeping high over his left shoulder. His armor had been restored to its familiar brilliant purple, edged in bright gold and inlaid with opalescent stones and gilded carvings. A long-scaled cloak was secured to his armor by silver brooches, and trailing parchments hung from his shoulder guards. He bore no weapon, and his hands continually itched to reach for his absent sword, to feel the reassuring heat of its silver grip, and the perversely comforting presence that spoke to him through Serena D'Angelus's masterpiece. Though he had not wielded Fireblade in many months, he missed even its balance and fiery edge. Without a weapon, especially the one torn from the Leia Temple, his thoughts were clearer, uncluttered by intrusive voices and treacherous thoughts. But, try as he might, he could not bring himself to forsake the weapon. The wounds he had suffered on Tarsus had healed, such that no observer would ever suspect the seriousness of them. And to commemorate his defeat of the Eldar god, a fresh mosaic had been created and hung in the central apothecarium of the Andronius. Issue orders to all ships to disperse into attack formation at my order, whispered Fulgrim, as though the glinting specks of light before him might hear his words were he to speak too loudly. Yes, my lord, said Captain Eisel with a smile, though Fulgrim could see past his apparently genuine pleasure to the jealousy beyond. He returned his attention to the viewing bay, smiling to himself as he saw that Horus's fleet still had no idea that the entire 28th expedition was within striking distance. Fulgrim rested his hands on the command lectern as the enormity of his last thought settled on him. He could attack the War Master's expedition and destroy it utterly from here. His own warships were closing to the optimal firing distance, and he could unleash a devastating fusillade that would cripple the ability of the 63rd expedition to respond in any meaningful way. If Eldrad Ulthran had spoken the truth, then he could end the coming rebellion before it began. Plot firing solutions to the vessels before us, he ordered. Within moments, the guns of the 28th expedition were trained on the War Master's ships, and Fulgrim licked his lips as he realized that he wanted to open fire. My lord, said a voice beside him. He turned to see Lord Commander Eidolon holding out his sheathed sword, the silver hilt gleaming in the low light of the bridge. Fulgrim felt the dark, smothering weight of its presence settle upon him, and said, Eidolon, you asked for your sword, said the Lord Commander. Fulgrim could not remember issuing the order, but nodded and resignedly reached out to take the proffered weapon. He looped it around his waist as though it was the most natural thing in the world, and as he snapped the golden eagle buckle closed, the desire to order the attack faded like morning mist. Order all ships to unmask, but not to fire, he ordered. Captain Eisel leapt to obey, and Fulgrim watched as the fleet before the 28th expedition suddenly became aware of his ships and began to scatter, desperately trying to maneuver into a position where it could avoid being blasted to pieces. Fulgrim knew that the frantic change of formation was a fruitless endeavor, for his vessels were in the perfect attack formation and at the perfect firing range. The Vox system burst into life as dozens of hails were received from the 63rd expedition, and Fulgrim nodded as a channel was opened to the Vengeful Spirit, the War Master's flagship. Horus, my brother, said Fulgrim, it seems I still have a thing or two to teach you. Fulgrim marched across the docking umbilicus towards the sealed hatch leading to the Vengeful Spirit's upper transit dock. Lord Commander Eidolon walked beside him, and Apothecary Fabius, Saul Tarvis, and the swordsman Lucius followed him. Fulgrim was disturbed to note that Lucius's face was heavily scarred, with deep, parallel grooves. Many were fresh or recently healed, and he made a mental note to ask the warrior about them once their business with the 63rd expedition was concluded. He had chosen Tarvitz and Lucius because he had heard that they had forged friendships amongst the Lunar Wolves, and such associations were never to be overlooked. Eidolon accompanied him, for he feared for what Vespasian would make of what Horus might say in response to the allegations laid against him by the Council of Terror. As to why he had included Fabius, he wasn't sure, though he had a suspicion that the reason would be made clear to him soon enough. As he drew near the hatch, the eagle-stamped pressure door began to rise, and warm air and light rushed to fill the umbilicus. Setting his face in an expression of calm reserve, Fulgrim stepped onto the metal decking of the Vengeful Spirit. Horus was waiting for him, resplendent in gleaming armor of sea green, with a brilliant amber eye at its center. His brother's handsome patrician features were alive with simple pleasure at the sight of him, and Fulgrim felt his worries fade at the sight of the magnificent warrior before him. To imagine that Horus might plan some treachery against their father was ludicrous, and his love for his brother swelled in his breast. 4 heroic specimens stood behind the War Master, who could only be the warriors that his brother called the Mournival, his trusted counselors and advisors. Each was a warrior born and carried himself proudly erect. Fulgrim easily recognized Ezekiel Abaddon from his bellicose stance, familiar top-knot and martial bearing. By the startling similarity between him and his Primarch, the warrior next to Abaddon could only be Horus Aximand, Little Horus. The remaining 2 he did not know, but each looked proud and noble, warriors to walk through the fire with. Fulgrim opened his arms, and the 2 Primarchs embraced like long-lost brothers. "It has been too long, Horus," said Fulgrim. "It has, my brother, it has," agreed Horus. "My heart sings to see you. But why are you here? You are prosecuting a campaign throughout the Purdus anomaly. Is the region compliant already?" "What worlds we found there are now compliant, yes," nodded Fulgrim as his retinue stepped through the pressure door behind him. Fulgrim could see the pleasure the Mournival took in seeing their familiar faces, and knew he had chosen his companions wisely. "I believe you are already familiar with some of my brothers, Tarvitz, Lucius, and Lord Commander Eidolon, but I do not believe you have met Chief Apothecary Fabius." "It is an honor to meet you, Lord Horus," said Fabius, bowing low. Horus acknowledged the gesture of respect and said, "Come now, Fulgrim. You know better than to try and stall me. What's so important that you turn up unannounced and give half my crew heart attacks?" The smile fell from Fulgrim's lips, and he said, "There have been reports, Horus." "Reports? What does that mean?"
Elspeth von
"Reports
Draken,
that things are not as they should."
rider of the dragon in
Hated that
Carmine.
he had to bring the petty concerns of scribes and notaries to his brother's notice. "Reports that suggest you and your warriors should be called to account for the brutality of this campaign. Is Angron up to his usual tricks?" "Angron is as he has always been." "That bad?"
Engineer!
"No. I keep him on a short leash, and his equerry, Khan, seems to curve the
We
worst
are
of
the
our
strength
brothers.
of the Empire.
Then I have arrived just in time. See, said Horus. "Are you here to relieve me?" Fulgrim forced himself to conceal the horror he felt that his brother could conceive of such a thing, and covered his consternation with a laugh. "Relieve you?" he said. "No, my brother, I am here so that I can return and tell those fops and scribes on Terra that Horus fights war the way it is meant to be fought, hard, fast, and cruel. War is cruelty. There is no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it is over." Fulgrim nodded and said, "Indeed, my brother.
Every
Come, there is
blade and
much for us to
bullet
talk
will
about,
find
for we
its
are living in
mark.
strange times. It seems our brother Magnus has once again done something to upset the Emperor, and the Wolf of Fenris has been unleashed to escort him back to Terra." "Magnus?" asked Horus, suddenly serious. "What has he done?" "Let us talk of it in private," said Fulgrim, desiring to end this public airing of such filthy accusations. "Anyway, I have a feeling my subordinates would welcome the chance to reacquaint themselves with your... what do you call it? Mournival?" "Yes," smiled Horus. "Memories of murder, no doubt." Horus indicated that Fulgrim should walk with him, and the 2 Primarchs marched from the transit deck. Eidolon followed in his footsteps, while Abaddon and Horus Aximand fell in behind the War Master. But Fulgrim could not fail to notice the accusing looks the lunar wolves threw in the Lord Commander's direction. Fulgrim wondered what had passed between the warriors on Murder as Horus led him through the halls of the mighty ship towards his personal staterooms. Horus spoke volubly of shared memories of more innocent times, and all that had been before them was the simple joy of warfare. But Fulgrim heard none of it, too locked in his own private misery to listen. At last, the journey ended at a pair of simple, dark-wood doors, and Horus dismissed the two members of his mourning. Fulgrim likewise dismissed Idolon, ordering him to attend upon Apothecary Fabulous. In many ways, it is fortuitous that you come to me now, my brother, said Horus. How so? Asked Fulgrim, as the War Master opened the doors and stepped inside. Horus did not answer, and Fulgrim followed him, seeing that in Astartes, in armor the colour of weathered granite, awaited him. The warrior was powerfully built, and his battle plate was bedecked with parchments and tightly curled scripture. His head was shaven bare, the skin covered in angular tattoos. This is Erebus of the Word Bearers, said Horus. And you are correct. About what? Asked Fulgrim. That we have much to talk about, said Horus, closing the doors. Horus's staterooms were Spartan and austere compared to his own, without the lush decorations and fine artworks that hung on every wall and stood proud on golden plinths. This did not surprise Fulgrim, for his brother had always eschewed personal comforts in favor of appearing to share the discomforts of his warriors. Beyond an archway veiled in white silk, he could see his brother's personal chambers, and he smiled as he saw the mighty desk, the piles of oath papers strewn across its surface, and the tome of astrology given to Horus by their father. Thinking of their father, Fulgrim looked over to the wall upon which was painted a mural he had not seen in decades. It depicted the Emperor ascendant over all, with his hands outstretched, and above him spun constellations of stars. I remember that being painted, said Fulgrim wistfully. Many years ago now, agreed Horus, pouring wine from a silver ewer and handing the goblet to him. The wine was deep red, and Fulgrim felt as though he was staring into an ocean of blood as he raised it to his lips and took a long draught. Oily sweat bristled on his brow. Fulgrim glanced over at the seated figure of Erebus and felt an irrational dislike for the word bearer, despite never having met him or heard a single word pass his lips. He had never particularly relished the company of Lorgar or the warriors of the 17th Legion, finding their enthusiasms unwholesome and their former zeal in proclaiming the Emperor as a figure of worship, contrary to the central tenets of the Great Crusade. Tell me of Lorgar, ordered Fulgrim. It has been some time since I have seen him. He prospers? He does indeed, smiled Erebus, like never before. Fulgrim frowned at the warrior's choice of words and sat down on the couch facing the War Master's desk. The War Master sliced the flesh of an apple with a gleaming serpent-hilted dagger, and Fulgrim's rarefied senses could feel an unspoken tension in the air, a miasma of things unsaid and great potential. Whatever Horus had in mind was clearly something of great import. You have recovered well from your wounds, noted Fulgrim, catching the furtive glance shared between the War Master and Erebus. Precious little information had been released from the 63rd expedition regarding the Davin campaign. Certainly nothing to indicate that Horus had been wounded, but the War Master's reaction proved that at least part of the Farseer's tale was true. You heard about that? Said Horus, taking a slice of apple into his mouth and wiping the juice from his chin with the back of his hand. I did, nodded Fulgrim. Horus shrugged. I attempted to prevent word of it reaching the other expeditions for fear of the damage it might do to morale. It was nothing, a minor wound to the shoulder. Fulgrim smelled a lie and said, Really? I heard that you were dying. The War Master's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, said Fulgrim. What's important is that you survived. Yes, I survived. And now I am
Von
stronger than ever,
Draken.
revitalized even. Fulgrim raised his glass and said, Then let us give thanks for such a speedy recovery. Horus drank the master's annoyance, and Fulgrim let a small smile creep across his face at the thrill of antagonizing so powerful a being as the War Master. So, began Horus, changing the subject, you have been sent to check up on me, is that it? Is my competence as War Master in question? Fulgrim shook his head. No, my brother. Though there are those who question your means of advancing the Great Crusade, civilians, light years from the battles we fight in their name, dare question how you make war, and seek to exploit our brotherhood by tasking me to bring your war dogs to heel. By war dogs, I assume you mean Angron. Fulgrim nodded and took a drink of the bitter wine. It cannot have escaped your notice that he is a far from subtle weapon. Personally, I do not favor his employment in theaters of war where anything less than total destruction is called for, but I recognize that there are times for subtlety and times for raw aggression. Is this war such a time? It is, promised Horus. Angron bloodies himself for me, and at this moment I need him drenched in blood.
What are we if we do not advance?
I'm sure you remember what Angron was like after Fulgrim, asked Horus. He raged against my appointment like a caged animal. His every utterance was calculated to belittle me in the eyes of those who thought my being named War Master an insult to their pride. Angron thinks with his sword arm, not his head, said Fulgrim. I remember that it took all my skill in diplomacy to calm the thunder in his heart and smooth his ruffled pride, but he accepted your role. Grudgingly, it has to be said, but he accepted it. Grudgingly is not good enough, stated Horus flatly. If I am to be War Master, I must have utter devotion and total obedience from all those I command. The days of blood to come. I am giving Angron what he wants, allowing him to affirm his loyalty to me the only way he knows how. Where others would pull tight the chain that binds him, I allow him his head. And his loyalty to you is forged anew in blood. Just so, agreed Horus. I believe that is what the Council of Terror objects to. I am the War Master, and I make use of the tools available to me.
The gardens of Moor are bastions of solitude in this dark world, where my arcane research and rapid transposition are made manifest.
First and foremost is to me. Fulgrim watched the War Master's eyes as he spoke, seeing a passionate fervor he had not seen in many decades. His brother spoke of magniloquent designs, and the fact that he required utter devotion from his followers. Was this the treachery the Farseers?
Amethyst Magistrix.
As Angron's loyalty was being won, was Horus swaying his cause?
No!
Fulgrim stole a glance at Erebus, seeing that he too was enraptured by the War Master's words, and wondered who laid first claim to the loyalties of the Word-Bearer's Primarch. Patience. In time, these truths will be known, said the voice in his head. You have always looked up to Horus. Trust him now, for your destiny is linked inextricably with his. He caught a sudden startled furrowing of Erebus'
Greetings,
brow,
countrymen.
and experienced a
I
moment's
welcome
panic
your offer.
as he wondered if the Word-Bearer had heard the voice, too. Fulgrim pushed aside such concerns and nodded at Horus's words. I understand perfectly.
All right.
I see, said Horus. And the Council's concern is simply with Angron's bloodlust?
Lady of
Not
Shaiish.
entirely, he replied. As I said, the Wolf of Fenris has been dispatched to Prospero in order to bring Magnus back to Terra.
Such
Though for
demands
what
are
purpose, I do not know.
unattainable.
He has been practicing sorcery, said Magnus. Fulgrim felt a spike of
For
anger in
Verena
his heart
and
at
Nuln.
the warrior's temerity in addressing a Primarch without a direct question being asked of him. Who are you to speak without leave in the presence
I
of your
foresee
betters?
great
Turning to
suffering.
Horus and waving a dismissive hand at the Word-Bearer. Who is this warrior anyway? And tell me why he joins our private discussions. Erebus
Dark
is
Lady of
an
None.
advisor to me, said Horus. A valued counselor and aid. Your Mournival is not enough for you? Asked Fulgrim. Times have changed, and I have set plans in motion for which the Council of the Mournival is not appropriate. Matters to which they cannot yet be made privy. Well, not all of them, at any rate. He smiled. What matters? Asked Fulgrim. But Horus shook his head. In time, my brother. In time, promised Horus, rising from behind his desk and circling it to stand before the mural of the Emperor. Tell me more of Magnus and his transgressions. Fulgrim shrugged. You now know as much as I, Horus. All I was given to understand, I have now told you. Nothing of substance as to how Magnus is to travel to Terra, as a penitent or a supplicant. I do not know, admitted Fulgrim. Though to send one who dislikes Magnus as much as the wolf to fetch him home suggests that he does not travel to Terra to be honored.
Come on!
It does not, agreed Horus, and Fulgrim could see a glimmer of relief ghost across his brother's face. Had Magnus, like Eldrad Ulthran, seen a glimpse of the future and attempted to give warning of an imminent betrayal? If so, the War Master would need to deal with him before his return to Terra. With the matter of the Lord of Prospero dispensed with, to his apparent satisfaction, the War Master nodded in the direction of the mural and said, You said you remembered this being made. Fulgrim nodded, and the War Master continued. So do I, Vibbing. You and I, we had just felled the last of the Omakad princes aboard their observatory world, and the Emperor decided that such a victory should be remembered. While the Emperor smote the last of their princes, you slew their king and took his head for the Museum of Conquest, said Fulgrim. As you say, nodded Horus, tapping a finger against the painting. I slew their king. And yet it is the Emperor who holds the constellations of the galaxy in his grip. Where are the murals that show the honors you and I won that day, my friend? Jealousy? Chuckled Fulgrim. I knew you thought highly of yourself, but I never expected to see such vanity. Horus shook his head. Oh, my brother, it is not vanity to wish your deeds and achievements recognized. Who among us has a greater tally of victory than I? Who among us was chosen to act as War Master? Only I was judged worthy, and yet the only honors I possess are those I fashioned for myself. In time, when the crusade is over, you will be lauded for your actions, said Fulgrim.
Our orders?
Snapped Horus. Time is the one thing
This
we do not
battle
have.
is
In
but a
essence, we may be
fraction of
aware
the
that
greater
galaxy
struggle.
revolves in the heavens,
Yet I
but we do
know
not
that
perceive
this
it, and
skirmish
the ground
must
upon which we walk
also be
seems not
won.
to move.
For every
Mortal men
victory
can
is
live out
crucial.
their lives undisturbed by such lofty concepts, but they will never achieve greatness by inaction and ignorance. So it is with time, my brother. Unless we stop and take its measure, the opportunity for perfect glory will slip
Handgunners!
away from us.
Our
We even
weapons
realize
are
that it was
yours!
there. The words of the Eldar seer echoed in his head as though shouted in his ear. He will lead his armies against your
We await your
Emperor."
orders!
Horus locked his gaze with him, and Fulgrim felt the fires of his brother's purpose surge like an electric current,
Handgunners!
feeding the flames of his own obsessive need for perfection. As horrified as he was by the things he was hearing, he could
The
not deny
Empire
a powerful force of
endures!
attraction swelling
Yes,
within
my
him
lord!
at the thought of joining his brother. He saw the rampant ambition and yearning
For
for
the
power that
WarHammer!
drove Horus, and understood that his brother desired to hold the stars in his
Emperor's
grip,
might!
as the Emperor did upon the mural. Everything you have been told is true. Fulgrim leaned back in his chair and drained the last of his wine. Tell me of this perfect glory, he said. Horus and Erebus spoke for 3 days, telling Fulgrim of what had befallen the 63rd expedition to Gavin, of the treachery of Ugan Temba, the assault on the crashed
Akbar's
Lord
brow!
of Terror,
We must
and
not
the
relent!
necrotic
We
possession
serve
that
the
had taken
Emperor!
his flesh. Horus spoke of a weapon known as the Anathem, which was brought to his staterooms by Fulgrim's apothecary after he had handed Fabius his seal to have it removed from the vengeful spirit's medical deck. Fulgrim saw that the
Missiles
sword
ready!
was
Ready!
crude,
Ready!
its blade like stone-worked obsidian, a dark red filled with
For the twin-tailed comet!
flint. Its hilt was made of gold and was of superior workmanship to the
Our
blade,
steeds are
though still
restless!
limited in comparison with the fire blade, or even the silver sword of despair. Horus then told him the truth of his injury, how he had indeed almost died, but for the diligence and devotion of his leader and squire. Of his time in the Delphos, massive temple structure, he said little, save that his eyes had been opened to great truths and the monstrous deception that had been perpetrated upon him. All through this reason, Fulgrim had felt a creeping horror
Ready
steal
for war!
across him, a formless dread of the words that were undermining the very best of his life. He had heard the warning of the El Garcia, but until this moment, he had believed the truth. He wanted to deny the warning.
To battle!
But each time he tried to speak, a powerful force within him urged him to keep his voice, to listen to his brother's words. The Emperor has lied to us, and Fulgrim felt
Taking
not hurt
position!
and uncoiled with such an utterance. Means to abandon
Get
the
them!
wilderness of the galaxy. He ascends to
General!
God.
Sigma calls!
Fulgrim felt as though his muscles were locked.
Seeking
Advance,
enemy!
For surely he should have thrown Horus
For
to
the
strike him
Emperor!
down for such a treacherous utterance. Instead, he sat stunned as he felt his limbs tremble as his entire
Moving!
world collapsed. How could Horus, those words, his silence, no matter that he had heard them before,
Handgunners!
different mouths,
For the
substance
comet!
of their
Ready!
reality had been
Ready for
until
war!
now, to see Horus' lips form words of rebellion kept him rooted to his chair.
Ready to serve!
Horus was his most trusted friend, and long ago
Yes,
they had
General!
sworn in blood
Ready!
never to speak an untruth to him. With such an oath between them, Fulgrim had to believe that either his father or his brother had lied. Joining with Horus, or all you have striven for will have been in vain. No, he managed to whisper, tears welling in his eyes. The anticipation of this
Master
moment had fired
craftsman!
his senses, but the reality of it was
I have a
proving to be
plan!
very different indeed. Yes, said Horus,
Send us
expression
out!
pained but determined. We believed the Emperor
Sir,
to be the ultimate
ready!
embodiment of perfection. But we were wrong. He is not
Detachments, move!
just a man.
Cavalry
He strove
ready!
to emulate his lie. All my life, I wanted to be like him, said Fulgrim. As did we all, my brother, said Horus.
My girl,
Pains me to
Maraz!
say these things to you, but they must be said. The time of war is coming.
At
Nothing
your
can prevent
service!
it. And I need my
Standing
closest
by!
brothers beside me when the time comes to purge our legion of those who are not. Fulgrim looked up with tear-rimmed eyes and said, "You are wrong, Horus. You must be wrong. How could an imperfect being have wrought the likes of us? Us? We are but the instruments of his will, sheer dominance of the galaxy before his ascension. When the wars are over, we will be cast aside. We are flawed creatures, fashioned from the wide womb of uncreated night. Even before our births, the Emperor cast us aside when he could have saved us. You remember the nightmare of Chemus, the wasteland it was when you fell to its blasted
Behold the
hinterlands?
silver hammer!
The pain you suffered there? The pain we all suffered on the planets where we grew to manhood. All of that could have been avoided.
Withdraw!
He could have stopped it all. But he cared so little for us. Simply let it happen. I saw it happen, my brother. I saw it all. How? Gasped Fulgrim. How could you have seen such things? In my near-death state, I was granted an epiphany of hindsight, said Horus. Whether I saw the past or simply had my earliest memories unlocked, I do not know, but what I experienced was as real to me as you are. The grey meat of Fulgrim's brain was filling fit to burst as he sought to process all that Horus was telling him. Even in my moments of blackest doubt, all that sustained me was the utter certainty of my ultimate achievement of perfection, said Fulgrim. The Emperor was the shining paragon of that dream's attainment, and to have that taken away from me... Doubt is not a pleasant condition, nodded Horus, but certainty is absurd when it is built on a lie. Fulgrim felt his mind reel, that he even entertained the possibility that Horus could be right, his words unraveling all that he had ever been and all he had ever hoped to achieve. His past was gone, destroyed to feed his father's lie, and all that was left to him was his future. The Emperor is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh, said Horus. To him we are tools to be used until blunted and then cast aside. Why else would he leave us and the crusade to retreat to his dungeons beneath terror? His apotheosis is already underway, and it is up to us to stop it. I dreamed of one day being like him, whispered Fulgrim, of standing at his shoulder and feeling his pride and love for me. Horus stepped forward, kneeling before him and taking his hands. All men dream, Fulgrim, but not all men dream equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. For men like us, the dreamers of the day, our dreams are ones of hope, of improvement, of change. Perhaps we were once simply weapons, warriors who knew nothing beyond the art of death, but we have grown, my brother. We are so much more than that now, but the Emperor does not see it. He would abandon his greatest achievements to the darkness.
Let us take it! There may be truths to
I know this for
uncover.
a fact. I did not simply receive this wisdom, I discovered it for myself, after a journey that no one could take for me or spare me. I cannot hear this horse,
Elspeth
cried
von
Fulgrim, surging to
Draken.
his feet as his flesh threw off the paralysis that had thus far held him immobile. He marched towards
Amethyst
the mural of the
Guardian.
Emperor and shouted, "You have no idea
The
what you are
graveyard
asking me to do."
rose.
On the contrary, replied Horus, rising to follow me. I know exactly what I am asking you to do. I am asking you to stand with me, to defend our birthright. This galaxy is ours, by right of conquest and blood.
Add it to
But
my
it is to be
collection.
given away to grubby politicians and clerks. I know you have seen this, and it must make your blood boil as it does mine. Where were those civilians when it was our warriors dying by the thousand? Where were they when we crossed the span of the galaxy to bring illumination to the lost fragments of humanity? I'll tell you where. They huddled in their dark
Wissenland's
dusty
true
rooms
power
and penned
made
diatribes
manifest.
like this. Horus reached down to his desk, snatched up a handful of papers, and thrust them into Fulgrim's hands. What are these? He asked. Lies, said Horus. They call it the Lectitio Divinitatis, and it is spreading through the fleets like a virus. It is a cult that deifies the Emperor and openly worships him as a god. Can you believe it? After all we have done to bring the light of science and reason to these pathetic mortals, they invent a false god and turn to him for guidance? A god? I, Fulgrim, a god, said Horus, his anger spilling out in a surge of violence. The War Master roared and hammered his fist into the mural, his gauntlet smashing the painted face of the Emperor to shards of cracked stone. Ruptured blocks fell from the wall to crash upon the metal deck, and Fulgrim released the papers he held, watching them flutter to the floor amid the ruin of the mural. Fulgrim cried out as his world shattered into shards as fragmented as the rubble of the mural. His love for the Emperor torn from his breast and held up for the
Von
dirty,
Draken.
useless thing it was. Horus came to him and cupped his face in his hands,
More will
staring
welcome
into his
them.
eyes with an intensity that was almost fanatic. I need you, my brother, pleaded Horus.
Lady of
Cannot
Shaiish.
do this without you. But you must do nothing against your conscience. My brother, my phoenix, my hope, wing your way through the darkness and defy fortune's
For Nuln. For...
revive.
Bring them death.
Rise. Fulgrim met his brother's stare.
Wielder of the
What
pale
would you have me
scythe.
do? Chapter 18. The flight deck of Deep Orbital DS-191
New
was a
knowledge
tangled
is
mess of
crucial for
twisted
our
metal
elucidation.
The Greenskins had occupied the orbiting defense platform for some time, and their unique brand of engineering had already begun to take root. Great idols of fanged iron behemoths squatted amid piles of wreckage, and machines that looked like crude fighter planes lay scattered and broken throughout the deck. Solomon took cover from the chattering hail of gunfire spraying from the rude barricade that had been thrown together. Constructed as to elegant a word for what the Greenskins had built at the end of the flight deck. Hundreds of roaring aliens had fired randomly and waved enormous cleavers at the 30 warriors of the Second when they had landed on the flight deck from their thunderbolts. As part of the Emperor's Children's assault, missiles had punched holes through the hull of the orbital with the intent of explosively decompressing the flight deck and allowing Solomon's Astartes to make an uncontested boarding at this supposedly unoccupied section. The plan had proceeded without any problems until the tide of wreckage had plugged the holes and hundreds of bellowing, fang-toothed greenskin brutes had charged from the shattered wreckage of their fighters and bombers to attack with mindless ferocity. Wild gunfire ripped through the flight deck. Corkscrewing rockets burst amongst the Astartes, and crude powder charges exploded as hurled grenades burst among the charging Emperor's children. Whoever said that the Greenskins were primitive obviously never had to fight them, shouted Gaius Caphan, as another greasy explosion of flame and black smoke erupted nearby, hurling spars of twisted metal into the air. Solomon had to agree,
For
having fought the
Verena
Greenskin
and
savages on
Nuln.
many occasions. It seemed as though there was no star system throughout the galaxy that had not been infested by the vermin of the Greenskins. Any sign of our reinforcements? He shouted. Not yet, returned Caphan. We're supposed to be getting extra squads from the 1st and 3rd, but nothing so far. Solomon ducked as a rocket skidded from the knotted pile of
Stop
metal
that!
sheltered behind with a deafening
I foresee
crash and
great
ricocheted
suffering.
straight up before detonating in
Rejection,
a shower of
as I
flames and smoke.
foresaw.
Burning shrapnel fell in a patter of scorching scabs of metal. Don't worry, cried Solomon. Julius and Marius won't let us down. At least they better not, he thought grimly, as he bleakly considered the
Their
possibility of
end
being
is
wrong.
inevitable.
With the unexpected counterattack by the aliens,
The
he was
Empire
on the
expands.
front, unless they could fight their way through hundreds of shouting warriors. Solomon wouldn't have given the matter a second thought against any other foe, but the Greenskin warriors were monstrous beings whose strength was very nearly the equal of an Astarte warrior. Their central nervous systems were so primitive that they took a great deal of punishment before they lay down and stopped fighting. A greenskin warrior was not the equal of the Astartes by any means, but they had enough raw aggression to make up for it, and they had numbers on their side. The Kalanides system was an imperial collection of worlds under threat from the Greenskins, and to begin the liberation of those worlds that had already fallen, the defense orbiters had to be won back. This was the first stage in the imperial relief of Kalanides, and would see the reuniting of the Emperor's children and the
To strengthen the Empire,
assaulted
raise Sigmar. Now,
Solomon risked a quick glance over the lip of the smoking metal as he heard a strident bellow sounding from behind the spars of metal and wreckage that the greenskins were using to cover. Solomon had no knowledge of
Amethyst
greenskin
mage.
language, or even if they had anything that could be described as language. But the warrior in him recognized the barbaric cadences of a war speech. Whatever passed for greenskin leadership was clearly readying their warriors for an attack. Tribal fetishes and glyph rolls hung with grisly
This
trophies
belongs
bobbed
in
behind
my
the rusted
archives.
metal, and Solomon knew they were in the fight of their lives. Come on, damn you, he whispered. Without support from Julius or Marius, he would need to order a retreat to the assault craft and concede defeat. A prospect that had little appeal to his warrior code. Any word yet? Nothing yet, hissed Caphan. They're not coming, are they? They'll come, promised Solomon, as the chanting bellows from ahead suddenly swelled in volume and the crash of metal and iron-shod boots erupted from beyond. Gaius Caphan and Solomon shared a moment of perfect understanding and rose to their feet with their bolters at the ready. Looks like they're going up the center, shouted Caphan. Bastards, yelled Solomon. That's my plan. Second, open fire. A torrent of bolter fire reached out to the greenskins, and the front line was scythed down by a rippling series of explosions. Sharp, hard detonations echoed the walls of the flight deck as the Astartes fired volley after volley into the charging enemy. But no matter how many fell, it only seemed to spur the survivors to a greater frenzy.
What
The
are we
aliens
if we
came
do
in a
not
tide of
advance?
Green flesh, rusted armor, and battered leather. Red eyes like furnace coals,
Now's
glittered
the
with feral
time.
intelligence, and they bellowed their
The
uncouth
Empire.
war cries like wild
Amethyst
beasts. They fired
Guardian.
noisy, blazing weapons from the hip, or brandished mighty
Bring
toothed
darkness
blades with
upon our
smoke launching
foes.
motors. Some wore armor attached with thick leather straps, or simply nailed to their thick hides.
In the
while others wore
borderland of
great
life
horned
and
helmets
death,
fringed with
one
thick
can
feathers.
lose
A
oneself.
huge brute in wheezing mechanical exo-armor led the charge. Bolter shells sparking and ricocheting from his protective suit. Solomon could see the rippling heat haze and a protective energy field shielding the monstrous chieftain. Though how such a primitive race could manufacture or maintain such technology baffled him. The bolters of the second wreaked fearful havoc amongst the aliens, blasting sprays of stinking red blood from great blooded craters in green flesh, or blowing limbs clean off in explosions of gore. Ready, swords! Shouted Solomon, as he saw that no matter how great the carnage worked upon the charge, it wouldn't be nearly enough. He put aside his bolter and drew his sword and pistol as the first greenskin warrior smashed its way through the rusted girders, not even bothering to go around. Solomon swayed aside from a blow that would have hacked him in two and swung his sword in a double-handed grip for his opponent's neck. His sword bit the full breadth of his hand into the greenskin's neck, but instead of dropping dead, the greenskin bellowed.
Like me,
savagely clutched
and
at the
carmine
ground.
dragons
Solomon
are
rose
wreathed
to
in the
avoid a
winds
stamping
of
foot that
Shaiish.
would surely have crushed his skull, and lashed out once more. This time his blade hacked through the
More
beast's
knows
ankle,
all
and it
paths
collapsed in a
have
thrashing
end.
pile of limbs. Still it tried to kill him, but Solomon quickly picked himself up and stomped his boot down on the greenskin's throat. before putting a pair
For
of
Sigma
bolt shells
and
through its skull.
Verena.
Gaius Caphan struggled with a greenskin head taller than him, its great motorized
They
axe
call me
smashing
the
through his head
Graveyard
ever slowly.
Rose.
Solomon
I
shot
suppose
him
it
in the
suits
face
well
and
enough.
ducked as yet another greenskin caved.
What does the Emperor
All
bid?
shaken till the battle was lost, and each warrior fought his own private.
Dark
war,
Lady
all
of
skill
Nome.
reduced to survival
So?
and killing. It couldn't end this way. A lifetime of glory and
I
honor
longed
couldn't
for the
end at
tranquility
hands
of the
greenskins.
gardens.
He had fought side by side with some of the Imperium's greatest heroes, and there was no way he was going to die fighting a foe as inglorious as these brutes. Unfortunately, he thought wryly, they didn't seem to know that. Where in the name of terror were Julius and Marius?
Rider
He
of the
saw a pair of
dragon
his
in
warriors borne
Carmine,
to the deck by
Von
a pack of
Draken.
howling greenskins, a roaring axe hacking their Mark IV plates to splintered ruins.
When Gelt looks upon
Another
me,
was
he
ripped almost in two
stares.
by a close-range
Perhaps
burst
he
from a
fears me,
monstrous
or
rotary
lusts
cannon
after
that
my
was carried by
power
a
over
greenskin as though
death.
it weighed no more than a pistol. Even as he watched these tragedies play out, a rusted cleaver smote him in the chest and hurled him backwards. His armor split under the impact, and he coughed blood, looking up into the snarling, fanged gorge of the greenskin leader. The hissing, wheezing armor enlarged its burly physique, its muscles powered by mighty pistons and roaring bellows. Solomon rolled aside as the cleaver arced towards him, crying out as splintered ends of bone ground together in his chest. Momentary pain paralyzed him, but even as he awaited another attack, he heard the sound of massed bolter fire and the high-pitched whine of 100 chainswords. The greenskin before him moved up in response to the sound, and Solomon did not waste his opportunity, unloading his weapon full in its face, pulping its thickly boned skull in a torrent of explosive shells. Its metal exoskeleton kept it on its feet, but suddenly the greenskin force was in disarray as newly arrived Emperor's children tore into the battle, delivering point-blank shots from bolt pistols, or cutting limbs and heads from bodies with precisely aimed sword blows. In moments, the fighting was done, as the last pockets of greenskin warriors were isolated into smaller and smaller knots of resistance, and were mercilessly gunned down by the new arrivals. Solomon watched the extermination with cold admiration, for the killings were achieved with a perfection he had not seen in some time. Gaius Caphan, blooded and battered but alive, helped him to his feet, and Solomon smiled despite the pain in his cracked ribs. "I told you Julius and Marius wouldn't let us down," he said. Caphan shook his head as the captains who led the relief force marched over towards them. "That's not who came." Solomon looked up in confusion as the nearest warrior removed his helm.
For
"I heard you
Heldenhammer!
could use some help, and thought we'd lend a hand," said Saul Tarvitz. Behind Tarvitz, Solomon saw the unmistakable swagger of the swordsman, Lucius. "What about the third and the first?" he hissed, the fact that his battle brothers had forsaken the second more painful than any wound. Tarvitz shrugged apologetically. "I don't know. We were beginning our push to the main control center and heard your request for support." "It's a good thing we did," said Lucius, his scarred face twisted in amusement. "Looks like you needed the help." Solomon felt like punching the arrogant bastard, but held his tongue, for the swordsman was right. Without their aid, he and his warriors would have been slaughtered. "I'm grateful, Captain Tarvitz," he said, ignoring Lucius. Tarvitz bowed and said, "The honor is mine, Captain Demeter, but I must regretfully take my leave of you.
Taking
We must
aim!
move on our primary objective." "Yes," said Solomon, waving him away.
Yes, sir!
"Go. Do the Legion proud."
Missile
Tarvitz threw him a
troops!
quick martial salute and turned away, sliding his helmet back on and issuing orders to his warriors. Lucius gave him a mock bow and saluted him with the energized edge of his blade before joining his fellow captain. Julius and Marius had not come. "Where were you?" he whispered. No one answered him. "My lord," cried the Solution, marching into Fulgrim's state.
Handgunners!
Pause or ceremony. The Lord Commander was arrayed in his battle armor, the smooth plates pointed and polished to a reflective finish. His face was flushed, and his stride urgent as he made his way through the mess of broken marble and half-finished canvases towards where Fulgrim sat in contemplation before a pair of statues carved to represent the captains of two battle lines. Fulgrim looked up as he approached, and Vespasian was struck again. Since they had taken their lead.
Destroy it!
The 4-week journey to the Canonical system had been one of the strangest times Vespasian could remember. His Primarch sullen, withdrawn, and the soul of the Legion. And
We
all
obey!
Raise yourselves! Legion's blood, only a blind one could
Kill
face.
everything!
slide.
We are Sigmar's heirs!
Only a very few of his friends still held ideas that were found, and he was at a loss to know how to stop the rot. With the orders coming directly from Fulgrim Island, the rigid command structure and his children allowed little, if any, room for leeway in the interpretation of their orders. Vespasian had requested an audience with Fulgrim all through the journey of the legal system, and though his exalted rank was normally entitled to question, his requests had been denied. As he had watched the battle hololiths from the Heliopolis and seen Solomon Demeter's company abandoned, he had decided to take matters into his own hands. Vespasian, said Fulgrim, his pale foot was hammered as he returned his gaze to the statue. How goes the battle? Vespasian controlled his temperature and the battle will be won soon. But good.
As long as we draw breath! Sigmar's commands blood!
Fire pointed at the statue of Marius Vibbing.
Don't give them an inch!
Damnable silver sword of the lair pointed at one of Julius Caesar.
Thrash them!
A weapon with a glittering grey blade and golden hilt lay in a shattered pile of marble sitting between the two statues, and Vespasian could see from the remains of a carved face that the statue had once been of Solomon Demeter. My lord, pressed Vespasian, why were Captains Verosian and Caesaron held back from supporting Captain Demeter? But for the intervention of Tarvitz and Lucius, Solomon's men would be dead. Tarvitz and Lucius saved Captain Demeter? Asked Fulgrim. And Vespasian was shocked to see a hint of annoyance surface on Fulgrim's face. How courageous of them. They shouldn't have needed to, said Vespasian. Julius and Marius were supposed to support the second, but they were held back. Why? Are you questioning me, Vespasian? Asked Fulgrim. I am enacting the War Master's will. Do you dare to suggest that you know better than he how we should prosecute this foe? Vespasian was stunned at Fulgrim's pronouncement and said, with all due respect, my lord, the War Master is not here. How can he know how best to prosecute the Greenskins? Fulgrim smiled, and lifting the grey-sheened sword from the remains of Solomon's statue, he said, because he knows that this battle is not about the Greenskins. Then what is it about, my lord? Demanded Vespasian. I should dearly wish to know. It is about righting a monstrous wrong that has been done to us, and purging our ranks of those without the strength to do what must be done. The War Master moves on the Istvan system, and on its bloody fields a reckoning will take place. The Istvan system? Asked Vespasian. I don't understand. Why is the War Master moving on the Istvan system? Because it is there that we will cross the Rubicon, my dear Vespasian, said Fulgrim, his voice choked with emotion. There, we will take the first steps on the new path the War Master forges, a path that will lead to the establishment of a new and glorious order of perfection and wonder. Vespasian fought to keep up with Fulgrim's rapid delivery and confused ramblings. His eyes flickered to the sword in the Primarch's hand, feeling a dreadful threat from the blade, as though the weapon itself were a sentient thing and desired his death. He shook off such superstitious nonsense and said, Permission to speak freely, my lord? Always, Vespasian, said Fulgrim. You must always speak freely, for where is the pleasure to be had in our facility for locution if we restrain ourselves from freedom? Tell me, have you heard of a philosopher of old earth called Cornelius Blake? No, my lord, but... Oh, you must read him, Vespasian, said Fulgrim, guiding him towards a great canvas at the end of the stateroom. Julius introduced me to his works, and I can barely conceive of how I endured this long without them. Evander Tobias thinks highly of him, though an old man such as he is beyond making use of such raptures as may be found locked within the pages of Blake's work. My lord, please. Fulgrim held up a hand to silence him as they arrived at the canvas, and the Primarch turned him around to face it. Hush, Vespasian. There is something I wish you to see. Vespasian's questions fled from his mind at the horror of the picture before him. The image of his Primarch, distorted and leering, the flesh pulled tight over protruding bones, and the mouth twisted with the anticipation of imminent violence and violation. The figure's armor was a loathsome parody of the proud, noble form of Mark IV plate, its every surface covered with bizarre symbols that appeared to writhe on the canvas, as though the thick layers of stinking paint had been applied over a host of living worms. It was in the eyes, however, that Vespasian saw the greatest evil. They burned with the light of secret knowledge, and of things done in the name of experience that it would sear his soul to know but a fraction of. No vileness was beyond this apparition, no depths too low to embrace, and no practice too vile to be indulged in. As he stared into the lidless eyes of the image, they fixed upon him, and he felt the painting's leprous visage peel back the layers of his soul as it hunted for the darkness within him that it would bring forth and nurture. The sense of violation was horrific. He dropped to his knees as he fought to avert his gaze from the burning cruelty of the painting and the terrifying void that existed beyond its eyes. He saw the birth and death of universes in the wheeling stars of its eyes, and the futility of his feeble race in denying their every whim. The painting's lips bulged, twisting in a rictus grin. "Give in to me," it seemed to say. "Expose your deepest desires to me." Vespasian felt every corner of his being drenched with darkness and spite, bitterness and fire. But his soul soared as he sensed the growing frustration of the violator as it found nothing to sink its claws into. Its anger grew, and as it did, so too did his strength. He tore his eyes from the painting, feeling its anger at the purity
To the
of his
provinces?
desires. He tried to reach for his sword to
Elspeth
destroy
von
this occupation
Drachen.
of evil, but the painting's monstrous will held his power of action locked in the prison of his flesh. "He harbors nothing," said the horrifying painting in disgust. "He is worthless. Kill him." "Vespasian," said Fulgrim above him, and he had the vivid sensation that the Primarch was not talking to him, but was addressing the sword itself. He fought in vain to turn his head, feeling the sharp prick of the sword point laid against his neck. He tried to cry out, to warn Fulgrim of what he had seen, but his throat felt as though bands of iron had clamped around it, his muscles locked to immobility by the power of the image before him. "Energy is an eternal delight," whispered Fulgrim, "and he who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. You could have stood at my right hand, Vespasian, but you have shown that you are a pestilence within the ranks of the Emperor's children. You must be cut out." Vespasian felt the pressure on the back of his neck grow stronger, the tip of the sword breaking skin and warm blood trickling down his neck. "Don't do this," he managed to hiss. Fulgrim paid his words no heed, and with one smooth motion drove the blade of the anatheme downwards through Vespasian's spine and into his chest cavity until the golden quillons rested to either side of the navel.
Spirita of Shaiish!
The cargo decks of the deep orbital had been cleared
Ranging
of dead
target!
by the Legion's minions, for a portion of the Kalanides battle force to assemble and hear the words of their beloved Primarch. Fulgrim marched behind a line of heralds, chosen from among the young initiates who were soon to complete their training as Emperor's children. The trumpeters fanned out before him, playing a blaring fanfare to announce his arrival, and a thunderous roar of applause swelled from the assembled warriors as they welcomed him. Arrayed in his battle armor, the Primarch of the Emperor's children knew he was a truly magnificent sight. His face was pale and sculpted, framed by the flowing mane of his albino white hair. He wore the golden-hilted sword that he had used to slay Vespasian, belted at his hip, eager to display the bond of brotherhood that existed between him and the War Master. Lord Commander Idol, Apothecary Fabius, and Chaplain Charmosian, the senior officers of his inner circle, flanked him. They had been instrumental in spreading the clarity of the War Master's vision to the warriors.
State troops ready!
The massive dreadnought body of ancient Rylanor, the Emperor's children's Ancient of Rites, also accompanied him, through tradition rather than loyalty to the Legion's new vision. Fulgrim waited graciously for the applause to die down before speaking, letting his dark eyes linger upon those he knew would follow him, and ignoring those he knew would not.
Sigmar
My brothers, called Fulgrim, his voice lilting and golden. This day you have shown the accursed greenskin what it means to stand against the children
Sigmar
of
commands!
the Emperor. More applause rolled around the cargo decks, but he spoke over it, his voice easily cutting through the clamor of his warriors. Commander Eidolon has wrought you into a weapon against which the greenskins had no defense. Perfection, strength, resolve. These qualities are the cutting edge of the Legion, and you have shown them all here today.
Ready!
This orbital is in Imperial hands once more, as are the others the Greenskins had occupied in the futile hope of fending off our invasion. The time has come to press home this attack against the Greenskins and liberate the Kalanides system. My brother Primarch, Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, and I shall see to it that not a single alien stands upon land claimed in the name of the Crusade.
Sigmar commands!
Fulgrim could taste the expectation in the air and savored the anticipation of his next words, knowing that they carried death
Handgunner!
and glory for us. The Legion awaited his orders, most of them unaware of the magnitude of what he was to
Standing
command,
by!
or that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Most of you, my brothers, will not be there, said Fulgrim. He could feel the crushing weight of disappointment settle upon his warriors, and had to fight to control the wild laughter that threatened to bubble up as they cried out at what was to be a death sentence for many of them. The Legion will be divided, continued Fulgrim, raising his hands to stem the cries of woe and lamentation his words provoked. I will lead a small force to join Ferrus Manus and his Iron Hands at Kalanides Fort. The rest of the Legion will rendezvous with the War Master's 63rd expedition at the Istvan system.
These helpless fools will soon cower in fear. For who could stand against the oncoming tide of death itself?
Until I can join you once more. Commander, if you please, said Fulgrim, gesturing Eidolon to step forwards. Eidolon nodded and said, The War Master has called upon us to aid his Legion in battle once more. He recognizes our skills, and we welcome this chance to prove our superiority. We are to halt a rebellion in the Istvan system, but we are not to fight alone. As well as his own Legion, the War Master has seen fit to deploy the Death Guard and the World Eaters. A muttered gasp spread around the cargo bay at the mention of such brutal vengeance. Eidolon chuckled. I see some of you remember fighting alongside our brother Astartes. We all know what a grim and artless business war becomes in the hands of such men, so I say this is the perfect opportunity to show the War Master how the Emperor's chosen fight. The Legion cheered once more, and Fulgrim's amusement turned instantly to sorrow, as he understood that, but for Vespasian's stubbornness, a great many of these warriors would have made a fine addition to the army of the War Master. With such warriors fighting for the War Master, what heights of perfection would have been beyond them? Vespasian's refusal to allow his men to sample the hidden heights of Fabius' stimulants, or to undergo enhancing surgeries, had condemned the warriors once under his command to death. War Master's immediately! Shouted Eidolon through the cheering. Though Istvan is not far distant, the conditions in the warp have become more difficult, so we must make all haste. The strike cruiser Andronius will leave for Istvan in 4 hours. When we arrive, it will be as ambassadors for our legion. And when the battle is done, the War Master will have witnessed war at its most magnificent. Eidolon saluted, and led the applause before turning and taking his leave. Now he had to deliver the second part of his pledge to the War Master. Now he had to convince Ferrus Manus to join the waiting. Chapter 19. The beat of hammers and the pounding of distant forges echoed through the anvillarium of the Fist of Iron. But Gabriel Santar, first captain of the Iron Hands, barely heard them. The Morlock Terminators stood sentinel around the edge of the chamber, the mightiest of them protecting the gates of the Primarch's inner sanctum, the Iron Forge. Rendered ghostly by the hissing clouds of steam that billowed from the deck, the fearsome visage of the Morlocks put Santar in mind of the vengeful predators that howled across the frozen tundra of Medusa, for which they were named. His heart beat in time with the mighty hammers far below, the thought of once again standing in the presence of 2 of the mightiest beings in the galaxy, filling him with pride, honor, and, if he was honest,
War is cruel. We do not
Ferrus
need to be.
Manus stood beside him, resplendent in his gleaming black battle armor and wearing a glistening cloak of mail that shone
Elspeth
like
von
spun silk.
Draken.
His high gorget of dark iron obscured the lower part of his face, but Santar knew his
To the
Primarch
provinces?
well enough to know that he was smiling at the thought of a reunion.
We march!
Von
It will
Draken.
do my heart proud to see Fulgrim again.
Lady of
Santar,
Shaiish.
said Ferrus. And Santar risked a sidelong glance at the Primarch of the 10th Legion, hearing a note of wariness in his master's voice that echoed his own feelings of the matter. My lord, he asked, is something the matter? Ferrus Manus turned his
I
sleepy
must
eye at
study
Santar and
this.
said, no, not exactly, my friend. You were there when we parted from the Emperor's children after the victory over the Diasporics. You know that our legions did not part as brothers in arms should. Santar nodded, remembering well the ceremony of parting on the upper embarkation deck of the Pride of the Emperor. The ceremony was to be held aboard Fulgrim's flagship, for the Fist of Iron had suffered horrendous damage when it had intercepted the Diasporex cruisers closing on the Firebird, and the Primarch of the Emperor's children had deemed it unfit for a ceremony of such magnitude. Though such a proclamation had incensed its captain and crew, Ferrus Manus had laughed on.
We need all these if we are to stand against the old foe.
Surrounded by the Morlocks, Ferrus Manus and Santar had marched through the ranks of elaborately armored Phoenix Guard towards the waiting forms of the Phoenician and his battle captains. The march had felt like they were running a gauntlet of enemy warriors instead of the Praetorians of their closest brothers. In Santar's eyes, the ceremony had been concluded with unseemly haste, Fulgrim taking his brother in an embrace that was as awkward as their first had been joyous. Ferrus Manus must surely have noticed the change in his brother's mien, but he had said nothing of it upon their return to the Fist of Iron. A tightening of the Primarch's jaw as he watched the 28th expedition translate into the churning maelstrom.
Perhaps you know why
had been
the
only
dead
indication
chatter
he felt
so.
slighted by his brother's coldness. You think Fulgrim still feels affronted by what happened at the Caralis Star? Ferrus did not answer immediately, and Santar knew that was exactly what was bothering his brother. We saved him, and his precious Firebird from being blown to bits, continued Santar. Fulgrim should be grateful. Ferrus chuckled and said, You don't know my brother, then. That he needed saving at all is unthinkable to him, for it suggests that he acted in a manner less than perfect. Be sure not to mention it around him, Gabriel. I'm serious. Santar shook his head, his lip curled in a sneer. Too damn superior, the lot of them. Did you see the way their first captain sized me up when we first boarded the Pride of the Emperor? You didn't have to be old Sistor to feel the condescension coming from them. They think they're better than us. You can see it in every one of their faces. Ferrus Manus turned to face him, and the full power of his silver eyes bored in on Santar, their cold depths chilling in their controlled anger. Santar knew he'd gone too far, and he cursed the fire within him that surged in him at the thought of any insult done to his legion. "My apologies, Lord," he said. "I spoke out of turn." As quickly as
New
Ferrus's
knowledge
ire
is
had risen,
crucial
his
for
fire
our
had
elucidation.
subsided, and he leaned down close to Santar, his voice...
Rider of the dragon in Carmine.
Yes, you did. But you spoke from the heart, and that is why I value.
Praise Sigma!
It's true that this rendezvous is unexpected, for I did not request the presence of the Emperor's children to aid us. The 52nd expedition needs no assistance in defeating the Greenskins. "Then why are they here?" asked Santa. "I do not know, though I welcome the chance to see my brother again and heal any rifts between us. Perhaps he feels the same and comes to make amends." "I doubt it," said Ferrus Manus. "It is not in Fulgrim's nature to admit when he is wrong." The great black iron gates of the Amphilarium swung open, and Fulgrim marched towards them with his flowing, fur-lined cape billowing in the heated gusts of air from the forges below. He stood for a moment at the chamber's threshold, knowing that to step across this line was to set foot on a road that might seem...
When war
sundered
does not call, it is
closest
better that I am alone.
He saw Ferrus Manus with his first captain, the chief astropar, flanking him. The grim form of Morlock bodyguards placed around the chamber's perimeter. Julius Caesar.
Those Drathjar must envy our invention.
And a full 10 of the Phoenix Guard accompanied him. to mark
Amethyst
the gravity of the
Magistrix.
moment. When Fulgrim sensed the moment was right, he stepped into the dry
They call
heat
me
of
the
Amphilarium
Graveyard Rose.
and marched to stand before his brother
it
Primarch.
suits well enough.
Julius Caesarron remained at his side as the Phoenix Guard moved to join the Morlocks at the chamber's edge, so that there was a purple and gold-armored twin
Yes.
of each of the steel-skinned Terminators.
Welcome, my
The
countrymen.
risk of approaching Ferrus Manus like this was great, but the rewards to be reaped upon the inevitable success of the War Master's ambition outweighed any doubts he might once have.
In the borderland of life
The War
and
Master
death,
had already begun
one
the
can
process of
lose
winning the other
oneself.
Primarchs to his cause, and Fulgrim had promised that he could bring him Ferrus Manus without a shot being fired. Such was their
The
shared
mysteries
history
of
and
the
bonds of
arcane
brotherhood
await
that Fulgrim
me.
knew Ferrus Manus
I
could
will
not fail to
unlock
see
their
the justice
power.
of their cause. The veil of lies had been lifted from Fulgrim's eyes, and it was his duty to reveal that lie to his closest brother. "Ferrus," he said, opening his arms to his brother, "it gladdens my heart to see you again." Ferrus Manus embraced him, and Fulgrim felt his love for his brother swell in his breast as the Primarch of the Iron Hands thumped his silver hands against his fur cape. "It is an unexpected joy to see you, my brother," said Ferrus, stepping back and looking him up and down. "What brings you to the Calanides system? Are we not prosecuting enough for the War Master?" "On the contrary," beamed Fulgrim, "the War Master himself sends his compliments and bids me honor you for the speed of your conquests." He bit back a smile as he felt the pride of achievement fill every warrior of the Iron Hands. Of course, the War Master had said no such thing, but a little flattery never failed to win over hearts and minds at such times. "You hear that, my brothers?" shouted Ferrus Manus. "The War Master honors us. Glory to the 10th Legion!" "Glory to the 10th Legion!" bellowed the Iron Hands, and Fulgrim felt like laughing at such primitive displays of pleasure. He could show these dull warriors the true meaning of pleasure, but that would come later. Ferrus clapped his silver hand on Fulgrim's shoulder and said, "But come, brother. Aside from passing on the War Master's honor, what brings you here?" Fulgrim smiled and placed his hand on Fireblade's golden pommel. He had deemed it impolitic to come before Ferrus without the sword his brother had forged beneath Mount Narodnia, where the 2 centuries ago, but he felt the absence of his silver blade keenly. Ferrus saw the gesture and reached behind him to lift Forgebreaker, the great hammer that Fulgrim had crafted. The 2 Primarchs smiled, and once again their brotherhood was obvious to all. "You are right, Ferrus. There is more that I would speak of, but it is for your ears alone," said Fulgrim. "It concerns the very future of the Great Crusade." Suddenly serious, Ferrus nodded and said, "Then we shall talk in the Iron Forge." Marius stood rigidly to attention on the bridge of the Pride of the Emperor. His flesh was alive with sensation as he watched the drifting slab of steel and bronze that was the Fist of Iron
Ready for
through the
war!
viewing bay. The ship was an ugly beast, decided Marius, its hull still scarred and unpainted after the damage done to it during the Battle of the Carolus Star. What kind of legion would travel in a vessel so unfitted to the glory of the warriors it carried? What manner of leader did not have the pride to embellish his fleet so that it displayed the perfection of the legion it represented? Marius felt his collar rise and struggled to control it as he found himself crushing the brass rails around the command pulpit. His anger stimulated the
Elspeth
newly
von
rewired
Draken.
pleasure centers of his brain, and it was only with a supreme effort of will that he forced himself to be calm. He had explicit orders from his Primarch, orders that might be the difference between life and death for all those aboard the Fist of Iron, and it would be the death of them all were he to fail when called upon. Fulgrim had specifically selected him for this role, for he knew there was no warrior more reliable than Marius in the Emperor's children, who would not hesitate or suffer any conflict of conscience.
I
at doing what
perceive
might
amethyst
have to be
vapors
done.
in the air.
Ever
Let us
since
ensure
going under the
Shaiish
knives of the
blows in
Apothecary
our favour.
Fabrics, Marius had felt as though his skin were a prison for the universe of
Gunner!
sensation that seethed in the meat and bone of his body. Every emotion brought an ecstasy of joy, and every hurt a spasm of pleasure.
Seeking enemy!
Julius had instructed him on the teachings of Cornelius Blake, and he had passed that knowledge throughout his company. Every one of his officers and many of the fighting Astartes had been sent to the Andronius for chemical and surgical
On our way!
advancement. The demands on apothecary fabrics had been so great that he had even established an entirely new corps of augmentative chirurgeons to meet the Legion's requirements for advancements. With the Legion's surprise attack on deep orbital DS-191, the Iron Hands had welcomed them with open arms, renewing the oaths of brotherhood that had been sworn with the corpses of the Escort's fleet. The picket vessels of the Iron Hands had stood down, and discreetly and without provocation, the pride of the Emperor and her escorts drifted across the ships of the 52nd Expedition. With one command, he could visit unimaginable destruction upon the Iron Hands.
Mage of
Thought made him
death.
sweat, and his every nerve leapt to the surface of
Moving
his
out,
skin,
sir!
singing with sensation.
Elspeth von
If Fulgrim's
Draken.
mission was successful, such drastic action
The dead
would not
call.
be necessary. Despite himself, Marius realized that he hoped his Primarch's mission would fail. Ferrus Manus kept his most prized relics and personal
For the
creations within
WarHammer!
the Iron Forge. Its gleaming walls were fashioned from smooth glass and basalt, and hung with all manner of wondrous weapons, armor,
Hellblast the
and
bodyguard!
machinery crafted by the Primarch's silver hands. A vast anvil of iron and gold sat in the center of the forge, and Ferrus Manus had
Handgunners!
long ago declared that none save his brother Primarchs were permitted to enter
Moving!
this most private sanctum.
Yes,
Fulgrim
sir!
himself had only set foot in it once before. Vulcan of the 18th Legion had once declared it a magical place, using the language of the ancients to describe
Emperor's
the
might!
magnificence it contained.
Fire!
To honor Ferrus's skill, Vulcan had presented him with a fire drake banner, which hung next to a wondrously crafted gun, with a top-loaded magazine, and perforated barrel formed in the shape of a snarling dragon. Its brass and silver body comprised the finest workmanship Fulgrim had ever seen, and he paused before it, its lines and curves so beautiful that to simply label it a weapon was to deny that it was in fact a work of art. I made that for Vulcan 200 years ago, said Ferris, before he led his legion into the Morden stars. So why is it still here? You know what Vulcan's like. He loves to work, but doesn't trust anything that hasn't had the beat of a hammer laid upon it, or the fire of the forge in its heart. Ferris held up his shimmering, mercurial hands and said, I don't think he liked the fact that I could shape metal without heat or hammer.
Ronald's
He returned it to me a century ago, saying that it should remain here with its creator. I think nocturnal superstitions aren't as forgotten as our brother would have us believe. Fulgrim reached up to touch the weapon, but curled his fingers into a fist before they touched the wall metal. To touch such a perfect weapon without fire. I understand that there is a certain attraction in a handsomely made weapon, but to apply such artistry to a thing designed to kill seems
Emperor's might! Moving now!
Really? Chuckled Ferris, hefting
For
forward.
the Emperor! Take the ground!
Sheathed at Fulgrim's hip. Then what were we doing in the Urals? Fulgrim drew his sword and turned it in his hands so that it caught the light and threw dazzling red reflections around the forge. That was a contest, smiled Fulgrim. I didn't know you then, and I wasn't going to have you outdo me, was I? Ferris circled the iron forge, pointing his WarHammer at the magnificent creations of the wood and chunky wall. There's nothing in weapons, machinery, or engineering devices that obliges them to be ugly. Ugliness is a measure of imperfection. You of all people should appreciate that.
Sigma,
Then
preserve
you
us!
must be perfectly imperfect, said Fulgrim, his smile robbing the comment of malice. I'll leave being pretty to you and sanguineous, my brother. I'll stick to fighting. Now come on, what's this all about? You speak of the future of the Great Crusade and then want to talk of weapons and old times. What's going on? Fulgrim tensed, suddenly anxious at what he was to ask. He had hoped to approach the matter circuitously, feeling out his brother's position and the likelihood of him joining them willingly. But with typical Medusan directness, Ferris Manus had come right out and demanded to know his purpose. How artless and blunt. When did you last see the Emperor? Asked Fulgrim. The Emperor? What has that to do with anything? Indulge me. When was it? A long time ago, admitted Ferris. Arena Septimus, on the Crystal Headlands above the Acid Oceans. I last saw him on Ulanor at the War Master's coronation, said Fulgrim, moving towards the great anvil and trailing his fingers along the cold metal. I wept when he told us that he believed the time had come for him to leave the crusading work to his sons, and that he was returning to Terra to undertake a still higher calling. Great triumph, nodded Ferris sadly. I was on campaign in the Kalorn Nebula, and too far distant to attend personally. It is the one regret I have, not being able to say my farewells to our father. I was there, said Fulgrim, his voice choked with emotion. I stood on the dais, next to Horus and Dawn, when the Emperor told us he was leaving. And it was the second most heartbreaking moment of my life. We begged him to stay, to see out what he had begun, but he turned his back on us. He would not even say what this great work was, only that were he not to return to Terra, then all that we had won would crumble and fall into ruins. Ferris Manus looked up at him, his eyes narrowed. You talk as if he abandoned us. That was how it felt, said Fulgrim, his tone bitter. How it still feels. You said yourself that our father was returning to Terra to preserve all that we have fought and bled. Do you really think he would not have wanted to see the final victory of the crusade? I don't know, said Fulgrim angrily. He could have stayed. What difference would a few years make? What could be so important that he had to leave us there and then? Ferrus took a step towards him, and Fulgrim saw the reflection of his hurt anger in the mirrored eyes of his brother, a betrayal of everything he and the Emperor's children had fought for over the last 200 years. I do not understand what you imply, Fulgrim, said Ferrus, his words trailing off as the import of Fulgrim's earlier words came to him. What did you mean when you said it was the second most heartbreaking moment of your life? What could be greater than that? Fulgrim took a deep breath, knowing that he would have to come flat out and say what he had come to say. What could be greater than that? When Horus told me the truth of how the Emperor had betrayed us and planned to cast us aside in his quest for godhood, said Fulgrim, relishing the horrified expression of surprise and fury on his brother's face. Fulgrim, shouted Ferrus, what in terror is wrong with you? Betrayed us? Godhood? What are you talking about? Fulgrim took quick steps to stand before Ferrus Manus, his voice passionate now that he had taken the final step and confessed his true reasons for coming here. Horus has seen the truth of things, my brother. The Emperor has already abandoned us, and even now plots his apotheosis. He lied to us all, Ferrus. We were nothing more than tools to win back the galaxy in preparation for his ascension. The perfect being he pretended to be was a filthy lie. Ferrus pushed him off and backed away, his ruddy, craggy features pale and horrified. Knowing he had to press on, Fulgrim said, others have already seen this truth and are moving to join Horus.
Bring them death.
Even aware that his designs have been unmasked, Horus will reclaim the galaxy in the name of those whose blood was spent to conquer it. Fulgrim wanted to laugh as the words
The Empire
the
expands.
thrill of finally unburdening himself almost too great to stand. The breath heaved in his lungs, and he could not tell whether the thundering he could hear was the blood surging in his skull or the
Elspeth
hammers
von
of
Draken.
Ferrus Manus shook his head, and Fulgrim despaired as he saw his brother's horror turning to fury. This is the new direction of the crusade you spoke of? Yes, cried Fulgrim. It will be a glorious age of perfection.
I must keep my
brother.
weakness
What
for
we have won
arcane
has already
trinkets
been given
in
away
check.
to imperfect mortals who will waste the glories we
I will
won
marshal
for
the
them.
men.
What we have earned in blood
To the
and tears
provinces.
will be ours again. Can't you see that? All I see is betrayal, Fulgrim, roared Ferrus Manus. You are not talking about claiming back what we have won. You are talking about betraying everything we stand for.
Dark Lady of
My
None.
brother, implored Fulgrim, please. You must listen to me. The Mechanicum has already pledged its support to the War Master, as have many of our brothers. War is coming. War that will engulf this
Now?
galaxy in flames. When it is over, there will be no mercy for those on the wrong side. He saw the color flood back into his brother's face, a raw and bellicose red that he knew all too well. Ferrus, I beg you for the sake of our brotherhood to join us. Brotherhood? Bellowed Ferrus. Our brotherhood died when you decided to turn traitor. Fulgrim backed away from his brother as he saw the murderous intent in his blazing.
I will not
eyes.
speak with enemies of the
Lothar and
Empire.
Angron are ready to
I
strike,
count
and
you
Mortarion
as
will soon be with
such.
us. You must join me, or you will be destroyed. No, snarled Ferrus Manus, hefting Forgebreaker to his shoulder. It is you who will be destroyed. Ferrus, no, pleaded Fulgrim. Think about this. Would I come to you like this if I did not believe that it was the right thing to do? I don't know what's happened to you, Fulgrim, but this is treachery, and there is only one fate for traitors. So, you are going to kill me? Ferrus hesitated, and Fulgrim saw his shoulders sag in despair. I am your sworn honor, brother, and I swear to you that I do not lie, pressed Fulgrim, hoping that there was still a chance to convince his brother not to act in haste. I know.
The graveyard rose.
Said Ferrus sadly. That's Fulgrim brought his sword up as Ferrus Manor swung his hammer.
I foresee great suffering.
The two weapons rang with a clash of steel that Fulgrim felt echo in the very depths of his soul.
The other
Blade,
side
blade,
beckons.
Blade, and lightning crackle from the head.
Raise
of
our
Ferrus' hammer.
standards
Two
here.
Primarchs stood locked together. Fulgrim pressing his fiery blade towards Ferrus, and the commander of the Iron
Lady
Hands
of
holding at bay
Shaiish.
the haft of his hammer. Burning light and sound filled the iron forge. The
Rider
weapons
of the
roared.
dragon in
unimaginable
carmine.
forces hardest in their creation were unleashed. Ferrus dropped his guard and hammered his fist into Fulgrim's face.
What does
force
the
of
Emperor
blow
bid?
Enough to crush the helmet of tactical dreadnought armor, but barely enough to bruise the flesh of a Primarch. Fulgrim rode the blow and smashed his forehead into his brother's face, spinning on his heel and slashing his red-hot blade towards Ferrus's throat. The blade clanged on Ferrus's gorget, sliding clear without so much as scratching the black plate.
Every
Ferrus spun away
blade
from the
and
turret
bullet
strike
will
and swung
find
his
its
hammer
mark.
one-handed as he bought some space with his wide swings. The two warriors circled one another warily.
Amethyst
How
mage.
deadly the other could be, having fought side by side in decades of war. Fulgrim saw tears in his brother's eyes, and the mixture of sorrow and pleasure he took from the sight made him want to throw down his weapon and clasp his brother to his breast, that he might share such a stupendous experience. "This is pointless, Ferrus," said Fulgrim. "Even now the War Master is preparing to expunge the weak from his forces at Istvan III. "What are you talking about, traitor?" demanded Ferrus. Fulgrim
Add it
laughed.
to my
"The
collection.
power of 4 legions will be unleashed against Istvan III, but only those portions that are not loyal to the War Master and his grand designs for the future of the galaxy. Soon, perhaps even already, those weak elements will be dead, cleansed in the fire of a viral bombardment." "The Life Eater?" whispered Ferrus, and Fulgrim relished the horror he saw in his brother's eyes. "Thrown alive, Fulgrim. How could you be party to such murder?" Wild laughter bubbled up inside Fulgrim, and he leapt to the attack, his blazing sword cleaving the air in a fiery arc. Once more, Ferrus's hammer came up to block the blow, but it was not a weapon designed for long duels, and Fulgrim rolled the blade over the haft and stabbed for his brother's face. The burning blade scored along Ferrus's cheek, the skin blackening to match his armor, and his brother cried out as the sword he had forged dealt him a grievous wound. Blinded for the briefest second, he staggered away from Fulgrim. Fulgrim stepped in, not letting his brother widen the gap, and smashed his fist repeatedly into Ferrus's face, hearing bone splinter beneath his assault. Ferrus reeled from the punches, blood drenching the lower half of his face. Fulgrim's senses shrieked with pleasure at the sight of his brother's pain, and his every sense was stimulated by what he was doing. As Ferrus stumbled, blinded and incoherent, Fulgrim closed and swung his sword for Ferrus's neck. The sword arced towards Ferrus, but instead of raising his weapon to block the blow, Ferrus dropped the hammer and turned into the blow, catching the descending blade in his molten silver hands. Fulgrim cried out as the pain of the impact jarred his arms. He tried to pull his weapon free, but Ferrus had it locked tight in his hands. The blade was utterly immobile, the chrome steel of his brother's hands swirling as though changing from solid matter into liquid metal. Fulgrim blinked as the metal of his sword seemed to liquefy.
Those
and the
Drathjar
fire
must
flame
envy
rippled
our
up
invention.
Ferrus's hand.
I require
Ferrus
absolute
opened his
solitude
eyes, and the fire of the
silence.
sword was alive in the silver coins of his eyes. "I forged this blade," hissed Ferrus, "and I can break it too." No sooner had the words left his mouth than Fireblade exploded in a bright flare of molten metal. Both Primarchs were hurled from their feet by the force of the blast, their armor and flesh burned by white-hot gobbets of molten metal. Fulgrim rolled and blinked stars from his eyes, stunned by the force of the explosion. He still held the ruined Fireblade, though all that was left of the sword above the hilt was a smoking nub of hissing metal. The sight of the ruined blade penetrated the red mist of sensation that drove him, and the symbolism of the weapon's destruction was not lost on him. Ferrus was dead to him, and would rather die than join the new galactic order of the War Master. He had hoped it would not come to this, but he knew that there was no other way this drama could end. Ferrus lay insensible, his hands glowing with the wrath of the Fireblade's unmaking. His brother moaned in pain at the destruction he had wrought, and Fulgrim pushed himself to his feet as his brother groaned at the horror of what had transpired within his sanctum. Fulgrim leaned down and took up his brother's WarHammer, a weapon he had poured his heart and soul into, a weapon that had been forged for his own hand in a time that seemed as though it belonged to another age.
Your holds are points of order in a sea of chaos.
As he stood triumphantly over his brother's recumbent body. Ferrus propped himself up on his elbows and looked up through blood-gummed eyes. You had best kill me, for I'll see you dead if you do not. Fulgrim nodded and raised Forgebreaker over his head, ready to deliver the death blow. The mighty WarHammer trembled in his grip, though Fulgrim knew that it was not its weight, but the realization of what he was about to do. The darkness of his eyes met with the blazing silver of his brother's, and he felt his resolve waver in the face of the murder he was about to commit. He lowered the hammer and said, "You are my brother, Ferrus. I would have walked unto death with you. Why could you not have done the same for me?" "You are not my brother," spat Ferrus through the blood of his ruined face. Fulgrim swallowed hard as he sought to summon the strength to do what he knew must be done. He heard a dim voice, a faraway whisper that screamed at him to crush the life from Ferrus Manus, but its entreaties were drowned by the memories of the great friendship he had once shared with his brother. For what could compete with such a bond? "I will always be your brother," said Fulgrim, and swung the hammer in an upward arc that connected thunderously with Ferrus's jaw. Ferrus's head snapped back, and he collapsed to the floor of the iron forge, rendered unconscious by a blow that would have sent a mortal man's head spinning through the air for hundreds of meters. The voice in his head screamed distantly for him to finish the killing, but Fulgrim ignored it and turned away from his brother. He kept hold of the hammer and made his way to the gates that led back into the Anvilarium. Behind him, Ferrus Manus lay broken, but alive. The great gates to the Iron Forge swung open, and Julius saw Fulgrim emerge bearing the mighty WarHammer forge.
Wielder of the pale
Gabriel
scythe.
Santar also saw the weapon Fulgrim bore, but was not quick enough to realize its import until Julius turned and
For
shouted,
Sigmar and Verena.
"Phoenician!" Instantaneously, the warriors of the Phoenix Guard swung the crackling
Praise
blades of
Sigmar.
their golden halberds and beheaded the Morlocks next to them with chilling, perfect symmetry. 10 heads clattered to the floor, and Julius smiled as Gabriel Santar and the Astropath spun in horrified confusion. The Phoenix Guard closed the noose on the center of the Anvilarium with measured strides, their bloodied blades extended before them like those of executioners. "In the name of the Averni, what are you doing?" cried Santar, as the gates of the Iron Forge closed behind Fulgrim with a hollow boom. Julius could see that the first captain of the Iron Hands was itching to draw his weapon, but did not do so with a certain knowledge that his death would follow as soon as he reached for it. "Where is Ferrus Manus?" demanded Santar, but Fulgrim silenced him with a shake of his head and a sly smile of pity. "He is alive, Gabriel," said Fulgrim, and Julius hid his surprise at this news. "He would not listen to reason, and now you will all suffer. Julius." Julius smiled and turned to Gabriel Santar, lightning-sheathed claws sliding from the gauntlets of his Terminator armor. Even as Santar saw what must inevitably happen next, it was too late, as Julius hammered the crackling blades into his chest and tore him downwards. The energized claw tore through Santar's armor, ripping through his chest cavity and exiting in a gory spray of blood at his pelvis.
An affront to Orion.
Collapsed, his life blood flooding from his ruined body, and Julius savored the delicious
An
aroma
impossible
of
path.
electrically burnt flesh. Fulgrim nodded appreciatively and opened a channel to the pride of the Emperor. Marius, he said, we will be making our way to the
incorporeal.
Firebird and could use something to keep the 52nd Expedition's ships busy. You may open fire.
Like me,
Chapter
and
20.
carmine dragons are wreathed in the winds
Dark
of
currents
Shaiish.
and swirling colors, unknowable beyond the gates of the Empyrean, flowed around the pride of the Emperor and her small complement of escorts as they forged a passage through the wall.
What are we
Fulgrim's
if we do
flagship
not
bore
advance?
scars of war, but for all that her hull was imperfect, her magnificence was undimmed. The guns of the Iron Hand's warships had left their marks upon her once pristine hull, but the shots had been fired in spite and futile defiance, for the broadsides fired by Fulgrim's warships had caught the Iron Hands completely by surprise. The battle had been short and one-sided, and though the vessels accompanying the pride of the Emperor were few in number, they had inflicted crippling punishment on those of their former allies, and disrupted their ability to respond immediately. Much to Marius Verosian's disappointment, Fulgrim had called a halt to the attack before the destruction of the Fist of Iron was complete. Leaving the crippled 10th Legion's fleet becalmed, the ships of the Emperor's children had disengaged and made the transition.
Dark clouds
into the
gather.
interior,
A fine
rendezvous with the
day
forces of the
beckons.
War Master once more. Initially, things had gone as smoothly as could be hoped for, but barely a week into the journey to Istvan III, storms of fearsome power erupted in the war. Tsunamis of unreality that crashed around the vessels of the 28th Expedition and smashed one to destruction before the few surviving navigators had managed to fight their way through the storms and guide the ships to relative safety.
Amethyst Guardian.
Moments prior to the first maelstrom force, terrifying shrieks of agony and
More
terror
will
had
welcome
echoed the
them.
length and breadth of
Let
the
us take it. There may be truths to uncover.
Alarums had sounded, and one entire chancel was blown clear
Amethyst
of the vessel by the
Magistrix.
force of psychic forces unleashed. Forks of purple lightning dancing
How
across the
could
hull
I?
before null shields and integrity fields had contained them.
Raise your
Hundreds
weapons!
of telepaths were dead, and those wretched ruins of flesh that survived were reduced to babbling moronic psychotics.
It is time.
Before
Yes,
their
my lord.
elimination, those that retained some form of communication spoke of terrifying galaxy-changing forces unleashed. A world devoured by a monstrous, creeping death. Fires that reached to the heavens, and the ending of billions of lives at a single stroke. Only Fulgrim and his coterie of most trusted warriors understood the truth behind these forces, and the feasting and carousing that greeted the news plumbed new depths of insanity. The Emperor's children reveled in the War Master's strength of purpose with the abandon that was now commonplace in the Legion. As the revelries of the Astartes continued, the preparations for Bekwa Kinska's Maraviglia reached new heights of wonder and decadence, with each rehearsal discovering new and undreamt of raptures to include. Coralina Seneca trod the boards nightly as she trained her voice to replicate the sounds recorded in the Lair Temple, and Bekwa's symphony soared passionately as she sought to encapsulate its power in musical form. As part of her quest, she developed new and outlandish musical devices, their melodies
The
as
nation
yet
calls.
unheard
So?
and unknown.
The
Such was their
graveyard
scale and
rose.
form that they more resembled weapons than instruments.
Bring darkness
Constantly
upon our
oversized
foes.
horns like missile tubes, and stringed mechanisms with long necks like rifles.
We need all
Lathanis
these if
became
we
a
are to
magical
stand
place
against
of
the
music
old
and
foe.
art.
To the provinces?
Remembrancers working on the Nacor and embellishments of the theatre, excelling themselves as they strove to create a venue worthy of staging the Malaviglia. Fulgrim spent a great deal of time in La Fenice, offering his insights to the artists and sculptors, and every suggestion was followed by frantic bouts of creativity as they were immediately implemented. Fragmentary scraps of information trickled in from Istvan III, and it was eventually discerned that the War Master's first strike against those whose loyalty remained with the Emperor
You are
had failed
a
to wipe them out
nuisance.
completely.
Cease.
Instead of viewing this as a setback, it appeared that the War Master had taken it as an opportunity to blood his loyal warriors and complete what had begun before the brotherhood of the Venetian technocracy. Warriors from the World Eaters, Death Guard, and Sons of Horus were at war in the fire-racked ruins of a murdered world, hunting down and destroying the deluded fools who believed they could oppose the War Master's will. Even now, declared Fulgrim, Chaplain Charmosian and Lord Commander Eidolon would be earning the War Master's plaudits as they displayed the battle perfection of their beloved legion. When the killing on Istvan III was done, the chaff
What does the Emperor bid? Let us move!
And they would be a sharpened blade aimed at the heart of the corrupt Imperium. But the reunion of Fulgrim and Horus was to be delayed, it seemed. With the death of the majority of the astropaths, communication with the 63rd Expedition was problematic, to say the least, with the shattered sanity of those left alive making the precise exchange of information between the two fleets virtually impossible. The navigators could not discern a course through the warp, not racked with heaving currents and battering storms, and declared that it would take at least 2 months to reach Istvan III. Fulgrim chafed at such delays, but even a being as mighty as a Primarch was powerless to quiet the tempests of the immaterial. In the enforced wait, he studied more of the writings of Cornelius Blake, coming upon a passage that lodged like a splinter of ice in his heart. He tore the page from the book and burned it, but its words returned to haunt him as the dark voyage through the warp continued. The phoenix is an angel, the clapping of whose wings is the roar of thunder. And this thunder is the fearful note that heralds the cataclysm, and the roar of the onrushing waves that will destroy paradise. The sculpture was almost complete. What had begun many months ago as a gleaming white rectangle, hewn from the quarries at Proconnesus on the Anatolian Peninsula, was now a towering, majestic sculpture of the Emperor of the Imperium. Ostian's workshop was almost tidy, only the tiniest chips and flakes of marble drifting to the floor, and the last stage of his statue's journey was being wrought with files and rasps of greater and greater fineness. It had been said that the point of a journey was not to arrive, but to savor the experiences along the way. Ostian had never understood that aphorism, believing that only the end result made the journey worthwhile. To anyone else, the statue would have been finished some time ago, but Ostian had long ago realized that only in these final stages could be found that which would breathe the final life into the statue. At this crucial stage, a true artist would find the last twist of genius that lifted a statue from a thing of stone to a work of art. Whether that was in one last imperfection or a human understanding of the frailty of life, he didn't know, and didn't want to know, for Ostian feared that if he ever examined his talent too closely, he would be unable to piece it back together again. In the months since their journey to the Kalanides system, a pointless venture if ever there had been one, for the 28th expedition had tarried barely a week and fought in only one battle, as far as he could tell, he had kept himself more or less confined to his studio and the subdeck where meals were served. La Fenice had become a place of lewdness, where people who should know better drank too much, ate too much, and indulged their every sordid appetite without regard for the mores of civilized behavior. The last few times he had lost in La Fenice, he had been shocked and revolted.
This
It
battle
appears
is but a
the
fraction of the greater
statue
struggle.
taking on an altogether
Yet
more
I
sinister
know that this
aspect, as the
skirmish must
Primarch
also
lent his
be
vision to
won.
the final
For
details
every
of its
victory is
range.
crucial.
Wild, orgiastic gatherings like the debaucheries of the ancient Romani Empire were now a frequent occurrence, and Ostian had chosen to stay away rather than be outraged on a daily basis. The one time he had been forced to set foot in it, since he had shared a drink with Leopold Carries, along the way, so he had not journeyed to their departed to the expedition. He had seen Fulgrim directing Serena Daniels as she completed a great mural on the ceiling. Its proportions were monstrous, and its subject matter a vile concoction of writhing serpents and humans engaged in unimaginable excesses. Serena had spared him a brief glance, and he was ashamed as he remembered his harsh words to her when he had last visited her. Their eyes had met, and for a moment he had seen a look of such anguished desperation that he had wanted to weep when he later recalled it. Fulgrim had turned as though sensing his presence, and Ostian had been shocked rigid at the Primarch's appearance. Brightly coloured oils rimmed his eyes, and his silver hair was bound up in ludicrously tight plaits. The faint lines of what looked like tattoos curled on his cheeks.
Our
and his
weapons
purple
are yours!
robe laid much of his pale flesh,
Withdraw!
revealing an inordinate number of fresh scars with silver wings and barbs piercing the skin. Ostian was transfixed by Fulgrim's dark eyes. Madness and the obsession had seen his studio
Handgunners!
magnified intolerable. The memory chilled him, and he retuned his attention to the marble. Perhaps the remembrances that had vanished from the 28th expedition to greener pastures had the right idea, though a suspicious voice in the back of his head worried that some darker reason lay behind the sudden lack of dissenting voices. Even the thought of such a suspicion was enough, and Ostian resolved that as soon as he found the spark of humanity that brought the statue to life, he would request a transfer to another expedition. The flavour of the 28th had become sour to him. "The sooner I'm out of here, the better," he whispered to himself. Though he could not know of it, Ostian Delafour's sentiment echoed Solomon Demeter's almost exactly, as he stared over the bombed-out ruins of the Choral City and the Precentor's palace. The desolate, fire-blackened landscape stretched out before him as far as the eye could see, as close to a vision of hell as he could ever imagine. This had once been a beautiful land. The obliterated perfection of its architecture in stark contrast to the rebellion that had fermented within its gilded palaces.
A moment of
Treachery
prayer.
played out in its blackened remains. A dark shroud had hung over Solomon ever since the battle on the deep orbital of the Kalanithi system, though the reason for Julius and Marius's abandonment of the second was now horribly apparent. He had seen neither of his brothers following the battle, and within hours he and the second had been in transit to the Istvan system to
Elspeth
rendezvous with 3
von
other legions
Draken.
to pacify the rebellious world of Istvan III. The heart of the rebellion was centered on a city of polished granite and tall spires of steel and glass, known as the Choral City. Its corrupt governor, Vardus Praal, had fallen under the influence of the war sickness.
This belongs
Rogue
in my
cycles that had
archives.
supposedly been wiped out
A
by the
grave
Raven Guard
task.
Legion a decade ago. The initial attacks on the Choral City had
More
washed
will
away
welcome
Solomon's
them.
feelings of unease. Released his anger and hurt and bloodshed, reassuring him that things were
Wielder
as they
of the
should be,
pale
and that
scythe.
his earlier misgivings
Praise
were no
Sigma.
cause for concern. Then Saul
It is
Tarsus
time.
with an incredible tale of betrayal and imminent attack. Many had scoffed at Tarbitz's warning, and Solomon had immediately known the truth of it. and had fought to make his
Moore's
brothers
gardens
realize their
swell
danger.
with fresh denizens.
As the monstrous scale of the betrayal sank in,
Be as a rose
sons
in
of
the
Horus,
graveyard of our
world eaters, and
foes.
Emperor's children had raced to find shelter before the deadly viral payload struck the world intended to be their tomb. Solomon had watched in horror as the first streaks of light lit up the sky and the detonations covered the skies in thick starbursts of deadly viral agents. The screaming of the city as it died haunted him still, and he couldn't even begin to imagine the horror that must have filled the minds of those who watched as the Life Eater devoured the flesh of their loved ones before reducing them to disintegrated hunks of rotted dead matter. Solomon knew how deadly the Life Eater was, and he knew that within hours, the entire planet would be a charnel house. Then the firestorm had come and raised the surface bare of any signs of its former inhabitants, burning them to ashen flakes.
I have torn myself from my
as it destroyed
studies
all
for
in its
this.
path and howled across the surface of Istvan III in a seething tide of flame. He shut his eyes as he remembered the underground bunker that had sheltered both himself and Gaius Caphan from the viral attack, finally yielding to the molten heat of the firestorm. The roar of the fire had been like that of some ancient dragon legend come to devour him, and the agony as his armor melted in the heat and seared his flesh was still fresh in his consciousness. Trapped beneath the rubble, they had called for help, but no one had come, and Solomon had wondered whether they were the only survivors of the War Master's treachery. On the third day, Gaius Caphan had died, his injuries finally claiming him as sunlight filtered into their prison of rubble. Eventually, Solomon had been found by one of the sons of Horus, a warrior named Nero Vipus, barely breathing.
What
but
are
clinging
we
to
if we
life
do
with the
not
tenacity of
advance?
one who refuses to die
Now?
until he has had his vengeance. The first month of the battles that followed the failed viral attack had passed in a blur of agony and nightmares, his life hanging in the balance until Saul Tarvis had come to him and promised that he would make the traitors pay for their betrayal. Seeing the fires of ambition finally lit within the young warrior had galvanized Solomon, and his recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. An apothecary named Vadder
My family
had
has
found
lived
time
in the
between
amethyst
treating the
wind
wounded
for
to bring him back
generations.
from the brink, and as the war ground onwards, Solomon found his strength returning to the point where he was able to fight once more.
Send
Taking the armor
these
of the
spirits
dead,
to
Solomon
Moor's
had
realm.
risen phoenix-like from what many had considered to be his deathbed, and had fought on with all the ferocity and courage for which he was renowned. Saul Tarvis had immediately offered to transfer command to him, but he had refused, knowing that the surviving warriors of all the legions looked to Tarvis for leadership. To usurp that would be pointless, especially now that their heroic defiance of betrayal was almost at an end. The massed forces of the War Master had driven them back into the heart of the palace, and the sons of Horus had committed their best warriors to the assault. Solomon knew the end was not far off, and had no wish to deprive Tarvis of the glory of his last stand. To Solomon's surprise, Tarvis had not been the only warrior to excel in the crucible of this desperate combat, but the swordsman Lucius had also performed wonders, taking the head of Chaplain Charmosian in a duel atop the traitor's Land Raider for all to see. As gratifying as it was to see these warriors come into their own, it was but a shadow compared to the anguish of Caphan's death, and the revulsion he felt at what